And we're just leaving that report from Rhiannon Mills because we have breaking news this hour, and it involves Peter Mandelson. And we understand that Peter Mandelson has been led away from his London home by a man you see there and a woman behind him and others wearing body cameras. It's not clear exactly who they are. It's not clear if Peter Mandelson has been arrested, but these are the latest pictures. And this follows a month of, well, certainly earlier this month, 2 properties linked to Peter Mandelson in Wiltshire and in North London were searched following allegations of misconduct in public office. The same allegations faced, of course, by the former Prince Andrew. And now these pictures are what are coming into Sky News. And we cannot say whether he has been arrested, but he is certainly being led away by a man and a woman there wearing body cameras. And we wait to see, and we're told by eyewitnesses there that they were wearing lanyards with police identification. So that is all we can tell you. No word at the moment on whether Peter Mandelson has been arrested. But the force, or the Metropolitan Police, launched an investigation into Peter Mandelson, an ex-Labour minister, of course, former ambassador to the United States, earlier this month after suggestions that he had passed on market-sensitive information to the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. At the time, the Metropolitan Police said Peter Mandelson has not been arrested and inquiries are ongoing. And Lord Mandelson has chosen not to talk about the investigation. He's previously expressed his regret for his association with Epstein and apologised, as he put it, unequivocally to the women and girls who suffered. But these are the pictures that are coming into us, and we await to see any official confirmation of what all this amounts to. John Craig is at Westminster, and so, John, well, we know what we can see. Peter Mandelson being led away by people with body cameras and at least one wearing a lanyard saying police. So it looks like they are police.
Yes, and because we know that police arrived at the house earlier on this afternoon. They were seen arriving there. And as we've just seen, you see the white car on the left there, and there's a male, assuming we can say an officer. The officer opens the back door of the car. Mandelson gets in. And in fact, the door was already open. And then the male officer gets in the back of the car with him. The female officer gets in the front of the car. Now, we don't know if it's an arrest or perhaps whether he's been invited to go to a police station to answer some questions. Perhaps...
John, I'm just going to interrupt you because we can now confirm that the Metropolitan Police are saying that Peter Mandelson has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. There is a statement from the Metropolitan Police, an update on the investigation into misconduct in public office offences relating to a government minister. And the statement says officers have arrested a 72-year-old man on suspicion of misconduct in public office. He was arrested at an address in Camden on Monday, the 23rd of February, and has been taken to a London police station for interview. This follows search warrants at 2 addresses in Wiltshire and Camden areas. John Craig I interrupted you, John, apologies, but there we are. That's the confirmation, and not naming Peter Mandelson, but then the police didn't name Andrew Mountbatten Windsor when they arrested him for misconduct in public office offences. So, well, now we wait to see what happens regarding Peter Mandelson.
Well, we can compare, I suppose, what's happened with Peter Mandelson today with what happened with Andrew a few days ago. Now, this has happened in broad daylight in the middle of the afternoon. He's not been bundled into a car or anything like that. It all looks relatively civil. He's obviously been told, it looks like, what's going to happen to him. You're going to get in the car. We're going to take you to a police station. We don't know which police station yet. We were told where Andrew was interviewed by police in Norfolk. But consider the difference. This is happening in the middle of the afternoon in full gaze of TV cameras, photographers and so on. With Andrew, it was a raid on his home in Norfolk, 8 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't learn about the arrest until later. Now, Andrew was held for questioning for 11 hours. Well, if it's 11 hours for Peter Mandelson, that's going to take him to the middle of the night. But So he has been. That is his home. They say it's in Camden. It's in the Regent's Park area of London, in the borough of Camden, and of course he has a home in Wiltshire. And as the police statement says, they've carried out searches there. They had search warrants for the 2 addresses. That home you see there, and also the home in Wiltshire. So. We knew also that that was the offence that the police were looking into, misconduct in public office. And what this is about, this is nothing to do with the allegations of of sexual misconduct involving Jeffrey Epstein. What this is about the Epstein tapes, which suggested that he had passed on commercial secrets, government secrets to Epstein at the time when he was a Labour minister, when he was Secretary of State for Business and Trade, back when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister. Now we know that Gordon Brown is furious at the disclosures that have come in the Epstein files, and Mr. Brown has been in regular contact, not just with the Met, but with several police forces, helping them, passing on information that he has. Because, of course, this was a period when the British government, under Gordon Brown as Prime Minister, the late Alistair Darling was Chancellor, were grappling with the aftermath of a world financial crisis. And we saw in the documents that a few weeks ago, that he was passing on, or appeared to be passing on, information about government activity to try and help the financial situation to a financier, Jeffrey Epstein. There you see the car. I'm not sure if there are flashing lights on the car. There are photographers there. And I repeat the point, it's so different from the 8 a.m, not quite a dawn raid on Andrew up in Norfolk, but it's all happening, it's all very visible in the middle of the afternoon in a residential area of London, not far from the centre of London. And there we...
interrupt you, but I mean, there is a difference, and the difference is that the searches have already taken place at Peter Mandelson's house.
Yes.
They were searching Peter Mandelson's houses at the beginning of this month.
Yes.
Searches had not taken place, as far as we know, at the properties of that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor had been living in before they chose to arrest him.
Yes, what's clearly happened here is, I'm not sure, I forget how many days exactly they've been making searches at the 2 Mandelson homes, but clearly they've found stuff which has led them to whether it's correspondence, whether it's stuff on computers. We don't really know at this stage, but they've obviously found stuff that's led them to feel that an arrest is necessary. Now, all this happened, Mark, at the very moment when Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, was giving MPs an update in the House of Commons about the Mandelson situation. And the piece of news, 2 pieces of news really. The first was that we're going to see some of the tranches, as Darren Jones called them, of the documents that Parliament voted should be made public in early March, he said. Well, Well, that's March the 1st is on Sunday. So in a week or so's time, we may be seeing some of the documents that Parliament voted should be made public on the 4th of February. The other piece of news actually that he gave was about Andrew, where he said that the government was not ruling out taking further action, for example, stripping him of his place in line, number 8 in line to the throne, and other actions. So we knew that the government was considering that, but we've got confirmation from Darren Jones at the dispatch box this afternoon. But in terms of the Mandelson inquiry, well, it's been quite a dramatic day with these events up in Regent's Park in the borough of Camden, and also the news about the release of documents as well. But there you have a very crestfallen, I suppose we could say, Lord Mandelson, as he was, Peter Mandelson, getting into a car, obviously wondering what's going to happen to him over the next few hours. Well, we can assume what's going to happen to him. He's going to face an awful lot of questions because, as I say, Andrew was kept for 11 hours by police when he was arrested. Now, it may well be that Mandelson will be allowed back home at some point this evening, and then perhaps face further questions tomorrow. We just don't know. But here we are, just after 5 o'clock, and he will be, if he's not arrived already, on his way to a police station, one assumes in central London, to be interviewed by, I believe it's the Specialist Crime Unit in the Met that's looking into this, because, of course, it is the same offence that both Andrew and Mandelson are being investigated over. And the suggestion is, of course, that he breached government secrets. He gave away commercial information to Jeffrey Epstein at the time in Mandelson's case, when he was a senior minister under Gordon Brown. And of course, the government at the time was grappling with the financial crisis, all sorts of economic problems. And there he was, according to those bits of paper that we saw a week or two ago, telling stuff to Epstein, who was a financier at the time. And of course, we know so much more about him now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point you make there, because it's worth remembering what this is all about. And this is about these messages, from way back 2008, financial crisis, when Lord Mandelson was pretty much right at the heart of Gordon Brown's government.
Very much so. I mean, I well remember that, of course, Peter Mandelson was a minister twice under Tony Blair. First Trade and Industry, then Northern Ireland. He had to resign in disgrace, or he was sacked twice. First time over a mortgage loan from his fellow MP at the time, Geoffrey Robinson. Second over a passport application from a top Indian businessman. And then he went off to become a Brussels commissioner. He was commissioner for trade as well, so he was considered an expert in that field. And it was an enormous shock to many at Westminster when Gordon Brown, who was, let's not forget, Peter Mandelson's great foe, going back to the Labour leadership of tussle of 1994 when John Smith died. He was. The two of them had a dreadful falling out, of course, because Mandelson backed Blair and not Brown. Brown, who was then in trouble. I mean, there was talk of coups, plots, a bit like now, against Gordon Brown. There was David Miliband, for example, and others were accused of plotting against Brown. And he brought Mandelson back. Trade and Industry. At one point, he became first Secretary of State, effectively Deputy Prime Minister. So he was right in one of the most senior positions in the government. And now we learn that he was sharing secrets, so it appears, with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Just bear with us for the moment, because I want to go and speak to the legal affairs commentator, Joshua Rosenberg. And Joshua, it was 3 or 4 days ago we were talking about something very similar. Just talk to us about the process that will now be taking place.
Well, what the Metropolitan Police said today, as you've been reporting, is officers have arrested a 72-year-old man on suspicion of misconduct in public office. He was arrested at an address in Camden on Monday the 23rd of February, has been taken to a London police station for interview. This follows search warrants at 2 addresses in the Wiltshire and Camden areas. So I think it follows that the police have obtained a search warrant for Peter Mandelson's home in the London Borough of Camden and also for his property in Wiltshire. If they've got a search warrant, then maybe they don't need to arrest him in order to search his properties, which is what seemed to be the position when the Thames Valley Police arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor last Thursday. They needed to arrest him in order to search his home. But it amounts to the same thing. You're arrested, you're taken off to the police station, your property is searched. Peter Mandelson has obviously seen this coming, so have the media, who were clearly outside his home waiting in case this happened. And as we were saying last week, the offence that he has been arrested for is this common law offence, this judge-made offence of misconduct in public office. The elements of that were summarised by the Court of Appeal just over 20 years ago. It's committed by a public officer acting as such who willfully neglects to perform his duty or willfully misconducts himself to such a degree as to amount to an abuse of the public's trust in the office holder without reasonable justification or excuse.
Yeah, and again, the allegation is this leaking of documents. And in Andrews and Mandelson's case, the allegation is leaking documents to the same man, Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, it's curious, isn't it? It's the same allegations relating to the same recipient, who, of course, took his own life in prison and who has nevertheless had this influence on 2 quite different people from the grave, as it were. Of course, these are simply arrests. There are no charges. There have been no charges for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It doesn't follow there will be charges for Peter Mandelson today either. But it is a significant move in the case of both of these men, and it does mean the start of the investigation process, although I suspect that in both cases it will take some months, perhaps even longer, before the police, in conjunction with the Crown Prosecution Service, decide whether charges are to be issued.
Yeah, I just want to warn viewers that there is a lot of flash photography on the pictures you're seeing on the left of your screen there, which are on a loop. And those pictures show Lord Peter Mandelson being arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The Metropolitan Police said a 72-year-old man was taken into a London police station for interview today. Back to Joshua. And Joshua, you were just making the point that you think in both these cases, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Lord Mandelson, these could be long investigations.
That's right, because the police are obviously going to look through documents, computer files, anything they can find at the homes of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Peter Mandelson. But it's unlikely that these by themselves will be sufficient to build a case. They will want to look, in both cases, I suppose, at government papers, at government documents. In the case of Peter Mandelson, perhaps not going back quite as far as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, goes back 25 years to the start of his job as a trade envoy. But nevertheless, it does look as if they will want to look through these documents. And I suspect that it's only when they've looked through these documents, compared that with the trove of documents disclosed by the US authorities, put together both sides of each email, if you like, and tried to work out a pattern, tried to work out what's going on, it's only then that they can assess the evidence and decide if they have a case.
Yeah, and the other emails that are involved here, we think, indicate that Lord Mandelson gave advance notice to Epstein about a bailout from the EU to save the euro. So there's a lot of stuff here from a similar period that the police will be wanting to question Lord Mandelson about.
That's right. And his lawyers will advise him that it's up to him to show that he has a reasonable excuse or justification for what he's alleged to have done. And in both cases, trade envoy, ambassador, other position in government, a person is granted a certain amount of discretion in how he handles information he receives. Clearly, if he's been given it in confidence and he hands it over to somebody else for personal gain, well, that's something that would amount to an abuse of the public's trust in the office holder, to quote from the elements of the offence. On the other hand, he might say that he was not misconducting himself, he was performing his duty as he best could, and therefore he has a defence. So because we've got this judge-made offence, which, successive governments have failed to put onto a statutory footing for years. It's 5 years ago that the Law Commission recommended there should be a clearer offence created by Parliament to replace this judge-made offence that goes back centuries. Because of the fact that we have only this common law offence, it does make life more complicated. I did suggest that to the Director of Public Prosecutions, who gave a briefing to journalists just over a week ago, nearly 2 weeks ago now, and he said that the elements of the offence were perfectly clear and he could advise the police on what they needed to establish if and when they decided they wanted to seek his advice on whether charges could be brought.
Joshua, appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to speak to Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Editor now. I just want to read out the Metropolitan Police statement, which says that officers have arrested a 72-year-old man on suspicion of misconduct in public office. He was arrested at an address in Camden on Monday, the 23rd of February, and has been taken to a London police station for interview. This follows search warrants at 2 addresses in the Wiltshire and Camden areas. Sam, well, these pictures and this moment, all very difficult for Lord Mandelson.
Make no mistake about it, Mark. This is a seismic moment, not only for Peter Mandelson, but for British politics as a whole. 6 months ago, the man that you can see in the pictures was the British ambassador to Washington, one of the maybe half dozen most powerful figures in this country, personally appointed by Keir Starmer against elements even of his own better judgment, persuaded of it, we believe, by his then Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, because he was thought to be the only man who could bridge the divide with Donald Trump's White House after the US president returned to the White House for the second time. Peter Mandelson believed to be the only person who could help Britain and sort out its trading and relationship with the US at this tricky time. Today, being taken away, as you can see, by police. Peter Mandelson has denied any wrongdoing, but I suspect there will be a lot of focus on those emails that we heard so much about, emails from the last time Gordon Brown was in the British government, when Peter Mandelson was in the British government. When Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, Peter Mandelson, then Business Secretary, alleged to have forwarded emails, that's what the Epstein emails suggested, forwarded emails to Jeffrey Epstein, potentially containing confidential government material. The allegation that he tipped off Jeffrey Epstein about an impending EU bailout and that he notified the financier about the activities of the British government and gave advice to big US bankers to mildly threaten the then UK Chancellor, the late Alistair Darling. All of those things likely to come under scrutiny. Peter Mandelson, not a figure shy of controversy, forced to resign from the British government twice when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, once over a home loan scandal, once over his relationship with the Hinduja brothers. But this challenge facing Lord Mandelson is now of a different order, with the police now, Metropolitan Police now arresting him. It will go, I think the political ramifications of this will go to the very heart of Downing Street, because once again, the focus will be on Keir Starmer's decision to appoint somebody with a track record as checkered as Peter Mandelson's politically, with those 2 resignations, in knowledge that there was a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein that went after his conviction for relations with minors back in 2009, a relationship that possibly involved taking hospitality from Jeffrey Epstein in the early 2010s. All of that was known to Keir Starmer at the moment that he appointed him the British ambassador to Washington. The question that Labour MPs will and are asking is why take such a risk? Is it really the case that Peter Mandelson was the only person who could solve the conundrum of the UK relationship with Washington, particularly given that there was a talented incumbent in Karen Pierce already occupying that office, but she ended up being hurried out of the British residency in Washington to make way for Peter Mandelson because he was seen by Keir Starmer and his then Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, as the only answer to the political question that Donald Trump's second presidency posed. And yet that has turned out to look like a political misjudgment by the Prime Minister, who will now, like the rest of us, be watching these pictures.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Karen Pierce. I mean, all this may not have come up to the extent it has if she had been kept in place. A well-respected diplomat in Washington. Donald Trump reportedly liked her. But anyway, look, that's going back in time. Sam, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, had just a few minutes before all this confirmed that the government expected to publish the first tranche of these documents relating to Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador in early March. Now, is there a question mark, do you think, now over that release, given what we're now seeing on our screen here, the arrest of Lord Mandelson?
Well, we wait to find out from the Cabinet Office. What the Cabinet Office has been doing in recent days is poring over those documents together with the help of the Metropolitan Police to work out what can justifiably and safely be released and what can't. And I think we already knew that there were quite a lot of messages, quite a lot of emails that almost certainly weren't going to be put in the public domain already, those directly relating to number 10, thought to have a carve-out from the publication. Some of those messages actually expected as early as next week. Whether or not the news of the arrest changes the timetable, well, we haven't heard that, but already those emails that might relate to any kind of case were off the table, as it were, from the publication. So we could still get some. The issue of these emails, though, Mark, just compounds the political headache. It's unclear quite how wide the scope of this release could be. But if it does include diplomatic cables from Washington to London with the most sensitive of political advice going in both directions, if it does include personal emails between senior figures in number 10 and Lord Mandelson, whether or not they relate to some of the issues at the heart of the arrest, no government can really withstand the kind of private conversations being shone and revealed in the public glare, in the public light like that. So I think that there are very many dark days ahead for this government, and Keir Starmer will be cursing the day that he ever agreed to the suggestion of his Chief of Staff and appointed Lord Mandelson as our man in Washington.
Sam, thank you very much indeed. And of course, we should just emphasise that the man you see there, Lord Mandelson, has repeatedly denied all wrongdoing. He previously apologised for maintaining his relationship with Epstein, which he admitted went on for too long. Well, in an interview with Ali Fortescue for tonight's Politics Hub, we got Shadow Chancellor Sir Mel Stride's reaction to this breaking news. Let's just have a listen to what he had to say.
Well, I think it also speaks to a lack of judgment on the part of the Prime Minister, and part of the process now of getting to the bottom of exactly what happened will also be what happened around his appointment, what information was known at what time and by whom, and were the right decisions, justifiable decisions taken in that context. So there's a lot that we need to know about. But it does seem to me that you've got a rather chaotic number 10, a Prime Minister whose judgment has been severely lacking, not just in that, but in issues around others like Matthew Doyle, for example. And now we've got this situation with the journalist Gabriel Program, who was investigated at the behest of Labour Together, and there are lots of issues around that. We've got Laurie Magnus, the ethics advisor, looking into that as well. There just seems to be this swirl of poor judgment and inappropriate things going on in and around number 10.
Mel Stride there, and just to repeat that warning of the flash photography that you are seeing and will continue to see on your screen as we show these pictures of Lord Mandelson being arrested in the last few minutes by police in London. He's been picked up from his North London home and has been taken to a London police station for questioning. I'm joined now by Baroness Smith, the Minister for Women and Equalities, and of course former Home Secretary who served in the same cabinet as Lord Mandelson. Good evening. Thank you for being with us. And well, I just wonder what you make of this news that Lord Mandelson is this evening under arrest.
Well, Mark, as you said, I was the Home Secretary, so I think I know better than to comment on what is clearly an ongoing police investigation. The police will do what they need to do in relation to this arrest and this investigation. But I suppose it just behoves us once again to remember, first of all, that anybody who knows anything about Jeffrey Epstein should, of course, be providing that information. And once again, we need to keep at the heart of our thoughts the victims of his activity, and that's what I'll be doing this evening.
Yeah, but as Mel Stride was just saying, these are images which will not go down well in Downing Street at all. More problems for Keir Starmer, because it does reflect on Keir Starmer's decision to appoint him as ambassador to Washington in the first place.
Well, of course, as soon as Keir Starmer understood what the reality of Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was, he sacked him. In the middle of the night, actually. So, I think that's an important area of judgment. But, yeah, of course, to be frank, I mean, I'm here today to talk about a really important set of reforms that the government is undertaking for children in our schools with special educational needs. That's what I'd rather be talking about.
Well, isn't this the issue here, that here we are, Peter Mandelson is on the left of your screen, and we're not going to move away from this story? I mean, isn't that the problem about the way that Peter Mandelson behaved? We don't know whether he's, guilty of misconduct in public office or not, but it is dominating the news, and you're not getting in what you want to talk about, which is schools.
Well, it is at this moment, and I think I've been pretty clear about our responsibility as public servants to allow the police to get on with their investigation. But for years to come, what will make a real difference to our children is whether or not we've got an education system that allows them to achieve their full potential, including those children with special educational needs. And that's the reason why today we've made important announcements about how we invest more money in providing the support that those children need without their parents having to fight lengthy legal battles to get that support for their children.
OK. The other thing we've learned in the last few minutes is that the Chief Secretary, Darren Jones, has said that the government expects to publish this first tranche of documents relating to Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador in early March. How embarrassing could that be for the government? I mean, these will quite possibly be a huge tranche, including personal, correspondence and messages between Prime Minister and Mandelson and other people at the heart of Downing Street and Peter Mandelson.
Well, of course, the reason why they're being published is because the Prime Minister has been absolutely clear that he wants full transparency about the process of appointing Peter Mandelson, as well as reviewing the way in which those appointments and particularly that the vetting happens. You can't have it both ways, Mark. If that wasn't happening, you'd be saying to me, why is there not more transparency? The Prime Minister took swift action against Peter Mandelson when the extent of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein became clear, and he's now making sure that the information and messages around that are being released as effectively as possible, whilst, of course, not prejudicing any investigations that are underway at the moment.
Right. I mean, but you can't have it both ways either, because Keir Starmer made the decision in the first place.
And that's part of what the messages will identify. It's part of the reason why Keir Starmer, having apologised for making that decision, is now making sure that all of the information around it is available for people to see.
OK, and just finally, Melstride described this as a dark day for Downing Street. I mean, he's right, isn't it? It is another dark day for Downing Street.
Well, yeah, in some ways, as you've identified, it's not what we want to talk about. More importantly, I don't think it's what those parents currently struggling to get the sort of support for their children with special educational needs that they want are also primarily interested in. You know, what they want to hear from me is reassurance that we will put in place for their children the additional support at an earlier stage to enable them to make the most of their lives in schools and to reach their full potential. And that's what we've been talking about today, both the £4 billion worth of additional investment, the way in which that will enable more children to get the support they need in the schools, which will enable them to learn alongside their friends and to achieve everything that they can out of our school system. That's what I've been focused on today.
Right, well, Baroness, I'm glad you were able to talk about that, at least at the end there, because we do, as you know, and you'll be aware, have this story to cover. But, Baroness, thank you very much indeed for coming on. Just to repeat the statement which the Metropolitan Police have issued in the last few minutes, and it is that officers have arrested a 72-year-old man on suspicion of misconduct in public office. He was arrested at an address in Camden today and has been taken to a London police station for interview. This follows search warrants at 2 addresses in the Wiltshire and Camden areas. And the pictures you can see there are Lord Mandelson being taken away by police officers outside his home in Camden. Right, let's bring in police commentator Graham Whettone. And Graham, it's almost deja vu, isn't it? I mean, it's the same allegations, quite a different arrest. I mean, but is the difference because they have already searched Peter Mandelson's homes, whereas with Andrew, no such searches had taken place?
Yeah, good evening, Mark. I would think so. People are getting this confused because it's the same offence, as in the same name type of offence, misconduct in public office. People seem to expect the same process or protocols to be applied by 2 different forces, and that's not always the case. They've clearly gone out and executed search warrants at Peter Mandelson's addresses in Camden and Wiltshire, but also then decided to arrest him. The arrest gives him the opportunity to do an interview at the police station while he's under arrest, or while he's detained. So he hasn't got the option of leaving the police station. The other alternative is to have people come in. We've seen this before in other instances or other cases where they almost do like what's called a voluntary interview. They attend at a pre-arranged time with their solicitor, but you're told that if you do that process, that you're free to leave at any time. Whereas clearly, if you're under arrest, you are detained, you're not free to leave, and you have to then come into the interview and stay in the interview until the officers have concluded the interview. So this follows what I would think be a normal process for this type of investigation. They've clearly been looking and reviewing numerous documents and paperwork over a long period of time. They've now reached the next stage of the investigation where they need to carry out further searches of premises owned and occupied by Peter Mandelson, and also to arrest him and bring him in for interview to speak to him about items they've already discovered, just to get some clarity in his account of what they've found so far.
And Graham, we made a lot on Thursday on the programme then about how Andrew was being treated effectively as a run-of-the-mill suspect, not a member of the royal family. Do we expect the same here, that Peter Mandelson will be treated in that way, not as a senior politician or former senior politician?
No, they're treated exactly the same way as other detainees. So they'll come into the police station, and people already pick up on the fact he's walking to the car himself, but he's got I would assume two detectives from the Met there walking alongside him. They've already assessed that he's not a threat to them, so he's not handcuffed. That'll be one thing I'm no doubt people pick up on. He's not been handcuffed. He's not a threat to them. He's not a risk to them. They put him in the car. They're going to transport him to a London police station. That may well have happened as well with Andrew. We didn't see images of Andrew's arrest or being taken to the police station, but that's happened with Peter Mandelson, taken out of his home address by 2 officers, placed into the vehicle. When he arrives at the police station, exactly the same booking in procedure. The facts of the arrest will be related to the custody officer. They'll authorise detention, tell him why he's been detained, the offence he's been investigated for, and then he will be read his rights the same as Andrew would have been. Right to a solicitor, right to have someone informed, and he can exercise those rights at any time while he's detained. If he's got a solicitor, he will then name his solicitor, and either he's contacted them already or the custody officer or another detective will phone them and ask them to attend the police station. And he's also allowed to have somebody informed of his arrest if they haven't already been informed. So those same rights will be explained to him. He'll then go through a risk assessment process. He will then be searched. His personal property will be taken off him, bagged up and sealed in his presence, and then likely to maybe have fingerprint, photograph, DNA taken. That's normally done now as a process when you're booking in, as opposed to in my day as a custody officer, it was done at the point of charging. But police practices have changed slightly, so they tend to take those now, so they've got them already on file if they need them. He will then, if his solicitor isn't already at the police station, likely to be placed in a cell waiting for his legal representative to arrive. So exactly the same process as any other detainee.
Well, it's interesting because Andrew was questioned for, I'm trying to think now, it was, well, he was arrested at 7 or 8 in the morning, and then he didn't leave till, 7 or 8 in the evening. So most of the day. Now, you've got Lord Mandelson being arrested in the early evening. I mean, is there a chance that he would have to spend the night in a cell?
You're right to highlight that. Yeah, there is. If they can't get him interviewed or aren't ready to interview him until what they would term to be a reasonable hour, as in has he been up all day, we don't tend to interview people in the early hours of the morning. We'll get to a period of time, say at 10 or 11 p.m. in the evening, and if we haven't interviewed them at that stage, they'll be put into a period of rest. So they'll be given a rest period. So they could actually spend the whole night detained at the police station and then interviewed tomorrow morning. So with the timing of this arrest, which is different to Andrew's, which was early in the morning, the police had all day then to interview him. And he would, as you're right to mention it, he then got released about 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. Peter Mandelson's arrest is very different. He's been arrested about 5 o'clock in the evening, taken to a London police station. If there isn't already a queue of people waiting to be booked in, because that can take an hour or two, he's unlikely to be booked in maybe for an hour or two. That puts us closer to 8 or 9 o'clock. They're not going to interview him much past, I would imagine, midnight, unless it's just literally interview him and then release him under investigation.
Is it likely this could be a shorter investigation because the searches of the properties have taken place already? I think they began searching the properties in early February the 5th or 6th, I think. So, but with Andrew, you know, the searches have been ongoing in the last few days, certainly. Could it be a shorter investigation?
Well, it's possible that they've arrested him to bring him in just to carry out an initial interview under caution at the police station with his legal representatives. It may well be that they're already almost like ready to do the interview. So just got to bring him in. He will still be booked in, still be searched, but it may well be the detectives and possibly even his legal representative are already for an interview. So it could almost go straight into the police station and straight into an interview. And depending what stage the investigation is at, he could then be released under investigation. It depends, and we don't know enough details about the investigation. It depends at what stage they're at, what information they've got, the questions they've already got to put to him they want to get either answers to or he's entitled to make no comment replies to them, or even have a prepared statement. But he will be allowed to have a consultation with his legal representative, and they will then decide whether they're going to answer questions, issue a prepared statement, or just make no comment. And it's up to the investigators then to decide what happens next.
Yeah, and just finally, Graham, I mean, this is an extraordinary situation. You've got Thames Valley Police who are investigating former Prince Andrew for misconduct in public office, and now you have the Metropolitan Police investigating a senior politician or former senior politician, or certainly a man who, when these allegations, what they relate to, sort of 2008, 2009, was right at the heart of the Downing Street operation.
Yeah, they're same offences, but I think very different circumstances or facts. So one's literally a government minister, other senior member of the royal family as a trade envoy, but clearly there's going to be some crossover at some point with some of the information that's been shared or passed on, but at the moment being dealt with very separately. My understanding is there is almost like a central investigation or central overview by the National Police Chiefs Council with all the forces involved in it. So forces that are looking at flights in and out the UK, trade envoys' role, ambassadors' role, details from government. So there will be some sort of central unit that will be overseeing all these, albeit we have, at the moment, we've got two separate police forces running almost like a similar type of offence they are investigating, but with two different individuals.
Yeah. Graham, thank you very much for coming on once again. It doesn't seem that long ago since we were talking, but thank you very much indeed. Just to repeat what we know this evening, and it is that Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The Metropolitan Police have said that a 72-year-old man was taken to a London police station for interview today. The former Labour minister has been accused of passing sensitive information, really, onto the paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein during Mandelson's time as business secretary, and this follows two of his properties previously being searched by police in connection with the allegations, which surfaced, like the allegations against Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, which surfaced following the Department of Justice's document dump relating to Epstein, which happened last month. Let's go back to our chief political correspondent, John Craig. And John, I mean, it's impossible to look at these pictures and not think of the political problems. I mean, obviously there's the legal problems now for Peter Mandelson, but the political problems that all this has caused for Keir Starmer.
And that's a point being made by senior Conservatives. We spoke here on Sky News a short time ago to Sir Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, and he said it speaks to a lack of judgment on the part of the Prime Minister and obviously in appointing him as ambassador. The arrest came at the very moment Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, to the Cabinet, was addressing MPs in the Commons on the latest developments on the publication of all those documents that Parliament voted to be released on the 4th of February. Now, what Darren Jones announced was that that's the first tranche, as he put it, is going to come in early March. Well, that could be as early as next week. But clearly the Tories are going to say this points to the Prime Minister's bad judgment in appointing him to the job of ambassador. Now, during those exchanges in the Commons only an hour or so ago, some Labour MPs were questioning the vetting, the procedure, the so-called due diligence when Lord Mandelson, as he then was appointed ambassador. One MP, Andy MacDonald, yes, from the left of the Labour Party, said, why on earth did anybody think it was a good idea to touch Peter Mandelson with a barge pole, he said, when he was asking a question to the minister. So there's going to be a lot of I told you so from critics of the Prime Minister. Obviously, the Prime Minister will have probably, almost certainly, have been expecting this development to happen at any point. It was very interesting listening to Graham Whetone there about what may happen to Lord Mandelson or Peter Mandelson. He may have to spend a night in the cells because, as we were discussing earlier, Mark, the timing of this in terms of the time of day is completely different from the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, who was arrested at 8 a.m. And also the fact that the police have chosen to do this in the middle of the afternoon in the full knowledge that there would be cameras outside Peter Mandelson's home. There they are walking to the car, the doors open, Peter Mandelson gets in, and then we see the officer, the male officer, gets into the car with him. As Graham was saying, no handcuffs on this occasion. The female officer gets in the front there. You see the police officer who's got a camera on him, a body camera, obviously recording it, and there's the car being driven away. That is Peter Mandelson's home. It's near Regent's Park, in fairly close to central London. And as the police statement says, that arrest follows search warrants, searches at Peter Mandelson's 2 homes, one in Wiltshire and that one in the borough of Camden in London. So a very public arrest that by the police. No doubt Peter Mandelson's solicitor may complain about that it's all been so public, cause him more distress, more humiliation. But what we don't know yet is whether a lawyer is there at the police station with him. But knowing that Andrew was interviewed for 11 hours, well, Peter Mandelson is obviously in for a very lengthy interrogation, which is either going to have to be paused later on this evening, or, as Graham Whetone was suggesting, he may have to spend a night in the cells. He's not taken any, there's no baggage, no overnight bag or anything like that. Well, let's wait and see how long he is going to be held in a central London police station. But a dramatic development, as Sam Coates was saying earlier. This is a man who was ambassador, was rubbing shoulders with President Trump less than 6 months ago. He was in the Oval Office. And of course, it's the top diplomatic position in the Foreign Office. It comes with a luxurious mansion, a Lutyens mansion, and it is the top post. And of course, it was a controversial appointment. There were those who said that it was very, very unwise of Sir Keir Starmer to appoint Peter Mandelson to this post, given he'd had to quit as a cabinet minister twice. One cabinet minister, Peter Kyle, said here on Sky News last year, it was decided he was worth the risk. Well, we are now seeing the consequences of that appointment. His relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is what's led to this police investigation, and today, this afternoon, his arrest by the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah, OK. John, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Washington now, and our US correspondent, James Matthews. And why Washington? Well, of course, this is another direct result, James, of that release, of that cache of documents by the Department of Justice ordered by Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's all about the documents, isn't it, right now, Mark? I mean, Mandelson very much tied to Jeffrey Epstein in the files that we have seen. There are a number of connections in terms of the finances, $75,000 paid by Epstein into bank accounts associated with Peter Mandelson. Mandelson said he didn't know anything about that or didn't recognize the payments. Documents important as they relate to the files connected to Mandelson's appointment as the ambassador to Washington. They are going to be released as a result of MPs' demands, and they will be fascinating. And there are concerns being aired that they may, shed light on the mechanics of his appointment, the reasons behind his appointment as UK ambassador, but also the thoughts of Peter Mandelson as they relate to the Americans, the American president. Mandelson, a man famously indiscreet, remember, but, John alluded to it there, Mark, the contrast between that picture on your screen of Mandelson being led away, face like thunder today, the contrast between the Mandelson we saw here in Washington, I saw 9 months ago inside the Oval Office, standing proudly by the Resolute desk as Donald Trump announced a UK-US trade deal. He was sent to Washington as the UK's point man on a whole range of issues, clearly, but particularly the most pressing issue of the day, and that was a trade deal that would accommodate the business of Donald Trump's tariffs. So, amongst the many questions being faced by Lord Mandelson, I suppose questions would be about that trade deal itself. He stood that day in the Oval Office with Donald Trump at the desk, beside Howard Lutnick, a Commerce Secretary, both men very much with ties to Jeffrey Epstein in the past. So I think that perhaps is a side issue for Mandelson right now, and certainly for the policeman who will be speaking to him in the coming hours. But it's part of the bigger picture that will need addressed. And You know, the whole Washington experience, Mark, he was surrounded by an embassy, forced to work with Lord Mandelson, and I suppose to rehabilitate him following the controversy, a controversy that he carried lightly through the United States Capitol, didn't, batted it away. When he arrived at the airport, the FT asked him about his associations with Epstein. He told them to F off. There came a day last May when clearly he felt comfortable in his new surroundings, invited us to ask him a couple of questions, having spoken to the Atlantic Council. He wanted to talk about trade. We did that. I asked him a couple of questions about trade, then asked him about Jeffrey Epstein. His answer was, I regret very much, my association. And I got a text from the embassy later that day, and it read, cheap shot for clicks, they said, on historic non-news agenda issues. So that was the kind of PR climate that Peter Mandelson created around him, walking tall in Washington only 6-7 months ago, but ultimately he left, sacked in September. And I remember the dying days when he was whisked away in a car and actually lying down in the back seat to avoid the waiting media as the scandal grew around him on this side of the Atlantic. And as we're seeing today, that scandal has reached peak right now.
Yeah, and one wonders what the reaction will be in Washington to all this. But we're just coming up to the top of the hour, James, and the big news is what you are seeing on your screen right now. These are pictures showing, in the last hour or so, the arrest of Peter Mandelson, arrested by a couple of Metropolitan Police officers at his home in North London. So good evening to you. You're watching the News Hour at 6 o'clock, and we have the breaking news tonight that Lord Mandelson has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. These are the pictures that we have been showing you of Lord Mandelson's arrest. He was led from his home in North London, near Regent's Park, by police officers who had obtained search warrants for 2 addresses, one in Camden, one in Wiltshire. And the statement from the Metropolitan Police says this: officers have arrested a 72-year-old man on suspicion of misconduct in public office. He was arrested at an address in Camden on Monday, the 23rd of February, and has been taken to a London police station for interview. Statement goes on, this follows search warrants at 2 addresses in Wiltshire and in Camden. Worth saying that Lord Mandelson has repeatedly denied all wrongdoing, and he has previously apologised for maintaining his relationship with Epstein, which he admitted went on too long. This is a live shot of Lord Mandelson's house in London, and it was from there, as we just saw, that those 2 police officers, or 3 police officers in fact, took Lord Mandelson away to a London police station for interview. Let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, and whichever way you view this, Sam, these are difficult days for Lord Mandelson and for Keir Starmer.
That's absolutely right, Mark. This is a seismic moment in British politics. One of the most famous faces in Labour politics over 4 decades being taken away by the Metropolitan Police and arrested. The allegation, passing sensitive information to the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein during his time as Gordon Brown's business secretary in the late 2000s, leaking details allegedly about EU bailouts and about the activities of the UK government. Peter Mandelson, just 6 months ago, was one of the half dozen most important figures in Keir Starmer's government. Just 6-7 months ago, at the start of September, he was our man in Washington, the link man between the British government and Donald Trump's White House. We were told he was worth the risk of the appointment because he was the only figure who could bridge the gap between London and Washington. Keir Starmer pushing out his Peter Mandelson's predecessor, Karen Pierce, to make way for one of the biggest beasts of Labour politics. But now look where we are today. A thunderous-faced Peter Mandelson, dressed in a gilet, walking towards the police car to be driven off for his police interview. Images that will haunt him and Downing Street for weeks and months to come, casting aspersions not only allegedly on Peter Mandelson's judgment, but much more gravely for this government on Keir Starmer's decision to appoint Peter Mandelson in the first place. The Prime Minister knew of the problems involving Peter Mandelson. He knew that he had had to resign as a cabinet minister twice during the Blair government. And he knew of Jeffrey Epstein's relationship with Peter Mandelson that continued after the point that Jeffrey Epstein had a spell in jail in Florida after he was convicted for sex crimes. And yet Keir Starmer, on the advice of his then chief of staff, still continued to press ahead to appoint in December 2024 Peter Mandelson to one of the highest, one of the most sensitive, one of the key linchpin roles of the British government, to be our man in Washington, a job that he did barely for a year. He was meant to get in there with the White House. We were told he was the only figure that could do it. My understanding is the reports were quite mixed about how successful he was about penetrating Donald Trump's White House, falling out in part with the chief of staff. So the idea he was the only person and carried out a successful job itself in doubt. But that isn't the problem and the challenge for Number 10 today. The challenge is the image of Lord Mandelson being led away by Metropolitan Police from his Camden home to be interviewed by police on this allegation of leaking sensitive information. He denies and has previously denied wrongdoing, but this police interview, a very, very awkward moment. There will be dozens, Mark, dozens of Labour MPs just again with their head in their hands asking why Keir Starmer ignored all of the warning signals, whether or not there is one rule for some and another rule for others when it comes to appointments, when it comes to his judgment, and how he didn't spot the pitfalls of the Mandelson appointment when he made it, despite all of the warnings, in December 2024. It's a huge moment, and it's a moment that is going to keep delivering trouble for the Prime Minister, because as early as next week, the government will have to start releasing documents about Peter Mandelson's appointment. Communications involving Mandelson and about Mandelson are going to have to be disclosed as early as next week after a Commons manoeuvre by the Tories forced the government's hand, and that data will now have to be disclosed, putting in the public realm stuff that will be highly, highly embarrassing to Keir Starmer's government at this moment of peril, a moment of peril that sees a by-election on Thursday and potentially catastrophic local and national elections in May, at this moment where his own side has become increasingly restless and he faces the potential of future challenges even from within his own cabinet. So the image of somebody that Keir Starmer staked a lot of his reputation and ignored a lot of warnings to install in one of the biggest positions of his government that has now come crashing down around him catastrophically with the news of this arrest, and the image of one of the most famous faces in Labour politics being led towards the police car for questioning by the Metropolitan Police. All of that is the last thing Downing Street needs right now.
Sam, thank you very much. Well, that was Sam. We've also got Anne, co-host of Politics at Sam and Anne's. Aren't we lucky? Anne.
Two for the price of one. It's amazing value.
We like that. We like a deal like that. Well, what do you make of it?
Yeah, just listening to what Sam was saying there, telling that story of this extraordinary decision, really, when you look at it, by Keir Starmer. There was already a very capable ambassador in post, Karen Pierce, It would have been an extension for her, it's fair to say, in Washington, but she was very well seen, including it's quite difficult to be in with all the different tribes of the Trump administration, let alone beyond that. But the Trump administration is obviously what we needed most, Mark, to try to get the trade arrangements over the line, as difficult as they've turned out to be. So Peter Mandelson just appeared to be someone who would come in, he would bring pizzazz. I went to, actually, one of the first long weekends of receptions, aka parties, which it frequently held, and particularly at this time in I think it's late April at the White House Correspondents' Dinner weekend, and there he was, really holding court. People were impressed frankly, by the fact that he could do, evening after evening, hosting, glad-handing, disappearing into corners, talking to the right people. Of course, you're going to hear different things from different quarters about was he liked, was he not? But he was seen, I think, as broadly being successful at that. And that's why it was just such a crashing moment when it started really to leak out more and more that the relationships with Epstein had been much more intimate than he had suggested, and the financial dependency and other things, the things that he seemed to be asking favours for. I don't think he had gone into that detail at all in this vetting.
I mean, is it one of the risks of appointing a politician as opposed to a well-practiced, long-serving diplomat into that position, given also, of course, that the politician in this case was pretty high risk?
Yeah, I mean, they would be the two risk factors that you put your finger on there. I suppose the opposing case that was made in Downing Street, Keir Starmer, still in some ways a rookie prime minister in dealing with foreign affairs, and the Trump administration not easy to deal with. Whether one agrees or not, I think he felt that having someone who understood Labour, who understood his number 10, who had been a serving politician, but who, if you like, was fairly sort of flexible in his ideology. I don't think you looked at Peter Mandelson and thought, oh, well, he's a little lefty, that a lot of his friends were on the right, he was able to do that. That was a new kind of appointment for a new kind of era. Now, as it happens, I think the fact that then the vetting was clearly was done in haste. I mean, I'm told by people close to Peter Mandelson, who, of course, will want to defend himself in these pictures, and you can see on his face that it is this absolutely devastating moment for someone, over 70 years old, who's seen himself as being at the top of British politics and the British progressive establishment to be going through this. He will be saying, well, yeah, I answered the questions that you put to me. I'm told that at one point some of these vetting conversations were moved through very, very fast because it was the Prime Minister's will to get him into that post. Now, clearly there are big questions to answer there. Peter Mandelson, as we're now seeing, he will be going through questioning, and whether we do get to a point of charge for any offence. But either way, there are massive questions for the vetting process of someone. Given exactly what you said, he'd come from a non-traditional background to an ambassador's post.
Yeah, lots of questions about the vetting process. Other questions too, because we have to emphasise he's been arrested, not charged, innocent until proved guilty, and he has always denied wrongdoing. But just going to the heart of the allegations, the misconduct in public office, appears to relate to the time in 2008 when Peter Mandelson was right at the heart of Gordon Brown's Downing Street operation.
Yes, and it's really to do with that, and to do with the fact that when he was in government, he was a business secretary, so he's in cabinet, he had access to all of the discussions and some documentation about what was happening in the aftermath of the major global financial crisis. The allegation, and that is supported to an extent by some things, but of course, when you look in the Epstein files, you're seeing a particular context of people who thought they were privately communicating. Did he at that point pass information that in some way could be seen as being damaging to the UK's interests for it to be shared, or was he just being gossipy and a bit irresponsible, which is bad, but is obviously not doesn't cross a bar? And I think one thing that we're learning, if you look also, not to compare these two things directly, Mark, but one thing we will learn in the next weeks and months as we go through this is it's easy to say, gosh, that person did something, they should never have done it. Whether that clears any sort of bar to be potentially an offence, and what isn't in scope there will, I think, be a big talking point for all of us as we go through this.
Yes, and as Sam Coates was saying, I mean, for Keir Starmer and so many Labour MPs, these images, whether he's guilty, not guilty, these images are just
it's a
the
miasma,
wrong time
you know,
for Keir
it's
Starmer, isn't it? It's
exactly. I mean, if you're seeing, I spent last week at a broad Munich security conference. We saw Keir Starmer, you know, putting on a really good front after a terrible week that he'd had when he really narrowly kept his own job. But then turning up at Munich, putting the UK on the stage in security and defence, genuinely an important thing at a time of high risk. Only then, you know, to find the next images, the next things that I'm constantly and others being phoned up and asked about across Europe and beyond is first Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and now Peter Mandelson. I wouldn't say the UK's like massively on the front foot in terms of its international marketing campaign at this moment.
No, although the UK is on the front foot when it comes to at least arresting these. I mean, it was a point made last week to me on the Thursday when Amy Wallace, who's the biographer for Virginia Giuffre, made the point that actually the police activity that is taking place by and large in the UK, not in the United States, which was a point well made.
It's a point well made after the Epstein files opened everything up, but it was, you know, one could say that there was a lack of curiosity about certain aspects of life. And I don't use the establishment usually in this word, you know, to sort of throw rotten tomatoes at it. Journalists who think close to politics can also be seen to be kind of part of that world in some way. But yes, I think it did. But there is a sort of asymmetric effect on the UK, isn't there? Because we have a Peter Mandelson, we have a major royal involved relative to the size of the country and relative to process. You're right, we do seem to be cracking on with it, but in the short term it is, I think, not the image that Keir Starmer would be wanting to see. And remember, we have a by-election coming on Thursday. Again, you know, would you be having this going on if you could design the leaflets? Probably not.
No, but it's a point you made a little earlier, which is interesting, that this is a man, Peter Mandelson, who likes to be in control, and now he most certainly isn't in control as the police begin these interviews.
Well, indeed. I mean, I was actually that part of Wiltshire, very close to, you know, to one of his properties, were also, I think, being searched. Your reporting now is being searched. I think that's a matter of, you know, that is part of the process when this kind of arrest on this kind of suspicion takes place. And, you know, he will certainly be able to have his defence and be able to make that. But what you're seeing is there, you know, rows and rows of paparazzi in these country lanes in Wiltshire. As it happened, he was in London and we saw the pictures of him getting into the car there in London as he was arrested. But I think what you're seeing is a perception, you know, that this is this sort of sickly cycle in which people who 1 minute are part of the glitz and gloss, the front foot for Britain and the world, or then being, you know, accompanied into police cars looking miserable and traumatised. I mean, I think this does have an impact. It does have an impact on politics. And as the story is really only beginning in both cases of what finally comes out of it, and also what the lessons will be. You know, right now, I think you make a good point to say we do seem to be getting on.
Lessons for who?
Well, lessons in one case for the royal family, and lessons for politics, for the Cabinet Office, for the Labour Party, for you know, for politics, as you know, lessons for pretty much everyone involved. And there will be more than enough blame to go around. Can we get through it having some sort of improvement to our processes rather than a lot of blame shifting and saying it wasn't me, Gov?
And thank you very much for coming in. Let's go straight to Washington. Our US correspondent, James Matthews. And James, pretty clear what we're witnessing here is the fallout from this huge release of these files and documents.
Yeah, and, you know, it's falling far. The credibility, one imagines, of the UK government, a UK government that put Lord Mandelson into position, the most senior position in the diplomatic service, the man who was anointed as the point man to negotiate that most sensitive trade deal with the United States. And, you know, apart from anything else, the Trump administration will be questioning the judgment, the credibility of Sir Keir Starmer. How on earth could this have happened? And for all the talk about release of files, communications, you know, and that will be interesting in itself, for all the talk about government sources saying, look, don't worry about the vetting, we missed nothing, even though it was fast-tracked. what vetting did it need beyond actually just reading the paper and finding out that Lord Mandelson had associations with Jeffrey Epstein, had stayed in Jeffrey Epstein's New York apartment subsequent to Epstein being convicted of soliciting sex from a minor? He stayed in his New York apartment. That was a question that I actually asked him, Mark, at a time when I think he reckoned he was on safe ground, that he was suitably rehabilitated in Washington. Having spent several months here, we got a call saying, look, if you're on a particular street at a particular time, he's going to walk out of a building, Mandelson, and you can ask him a couple of questions about trade. I don't know why they thought that we would ask him only about trades. They seem to be caught up in the three-dimensional nature of the way that Lord Mandelson appeared to do politics. For the public, it was perhaps more one-dimensional. You stayed with a convicted paedophile and sex trafficker. Why on earth did you do that? Let's have a listen to that exchange. In June 2009, did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
He was in jail at the time for soliciting prostitution from a minor.
And my knowledge of him is something that I regret. I wish I'd never met him in the first place.
Why did you have an association with him? Because he was in jail at the time.
Why did many people meet him? He was a prolific networker, and I wish I'd never met him in the first place.
Well, James, he's never thanked you for that interview, has he? But what about this point that was made to me on Thursday by Amy Wallace, the biographer of Virginia Giuffre, about the way the UK is moving on this, but not much is happening police-wise in the United States?
Yeah, to the consternation of Trump's critics, certainly, Mark. And we do hear on a repeated basis, as we learn more about what's in the files, actually, that question, how can so many in Donald Trump's orbit, including the likes of Howard Lutnick, who has been exposed as having told mistruths, potentially, certainly inaccuracies about when he had his last association with Jeffrey Epstein, he's been allowed to stay in place. Nobody appears to have batted an eyelid. I asked one of his Republican colleagues, Nancy Mace, how can he still survive in place? Her answer was, well, lying's not a reason to fire anybody. So that's the kind of firewall that people are coming up against, people who question why Donald Trump and his cohorts appear to be insulated, thus far. But UK attention clearly on Mandelson. I can tell you that US attention or heads have been turned here, Mark. The House Oversight Committee, Democrats on that committee, which is looking into the whole Epstein affair, it's tweeted this, says that Mandelson's been arrested. As we have said before, nobody is above the law. We will make sure. And it's maybe worth just reading an email that was put out a couple of weeks ago, a letter sent to Mandelson from two members of that oversight committee. They said this to him, inviting him to come and give evidence to that oversight committee. Well, you no longer serve as ambassador and you've stepped down from the House of Lords. It's clear you possessed extensive social and business ties to Jeffrey Epstein and that you hold critical information pertaining to our investigation of his operations. Given the appalling allegations regarding Epstein's conduct, we request that you make yourself available for a transcribed interview with committee staff regarding the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirators. They're interested in the bigger picture, Mark. Yes, he's being looked at for misconduct in public office as a minister. But clearly there's a big picture relating to Jeffrey Epstein, child sex trafficker. And we have seen in the Epstein files contacts between Mandelson and Epstein, payments made into bank accounts from Epstein, bank accounts associated with Mandelson, a picture of Mandelson in his pants in Epstein's Paris apartments in the company of a female. There's a birthday book where Mandelson talks about being in the company of people in Epstein's property, and he used the phrase yum yum, seemingly referring to these people. So what more don't we know about Mandelson? What other questions, beyond the questions inside a UK police station, does he have to answer about the wider Jeffrey Epstein crimes?
James, thank you very much indeed. Let's talk to Adam Bolton, a political commentator. And Adam, good evening. Thanks very much for being with us. And you have seen a thing or two in British politics. So what do you make of this?
Well, it's extremely shocking. I can't recall a former cabinet minister being arrested by the police. I think we do have to take a step back. While undoubtedly political opponents will do what they can to attack the Prime Minister for his judgment in making him an ambassador, theoretically, what we know about what's happened today could have happened if Keir Starmer had never sent Peter Mandelson to Washington, because this police investigation about misconduct in public office, as they say, relates to what was revealed in the Epstein files, which is about what Peter Mandelson did in 2009 and 2010 when he was a minister, a trade minister in Gordon Brown's government. So in that sense, they're direct parallels to this arrest today and the arrest last week of former Prince Andrew. And I think everyone has really been expecting that if Prince Andrew was arrested in that way by the police, then Peter Mandelson would be arrested. And so it has come to pass. What has happened to both of them is they have been caught out by the dump of information in the United States by the Department of Justice of the Epstein files, and people have gone through that material, are still going through it because it's so massive, 3 million documents, and they have turned up very, very incriminating things about Peter Mandelson and indeed about former Prince Andrew, which, although, of course, they reflect on their friendship with Jeffrey Epstein's conviction as a paedophile, they actually relate to holding an official post and betraying the information you were given on a confidential basis in that post to Jeffrey Epstein, who, of course, was an American and also a financier in a position perhaps to exploit that official information. So that is what they are being charged with. And the truth of the matter is, however many people now are saying, I always knew Peter Mandelson was a wrong 'un, or I always knew that former Prince Andrew was a wrong 'un, that it's only that forensic information, not revealed by journalists, but revealed by the Department of Justice in America, which has brought them into this position for their past behaviour.
Yes, and I mean, you make the point that if he hadn't been appointed by Keir Starmer, he could well still be in this position this evening. He could still be under arrest this evening. But I mean, it became a question of judgment hanging over Keir Starmer because he did appoint him.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it that Peter Mandelson was a very prominent, very controversial figure. In fact, you know, divisions even within number 10 Downing Street as to whether it was worth taking the risk of a man who, you know, was an experienced politician, a trade expert, sending him to Washington. And Keir Starmer, in the end, took the decision that it was. And clearly, with hindsight, that was a mistake. And people will say, well, you know, we always knew Peter Mandelson was going to blow up at some point. Indeed, some of the people who knew him very well, dating back to his time in New Labour and the Blair government, were shaking their heads and saying that it was a big mistake to send Peter Mandelson. And the other point I think is important to bear out in terms of the Prime Minister's responsibility is Keir Starmer has said on the record that Peter Mandelson lied to him about the extent of his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. And what was revealed in those documents, I think, has shocked everybody who knows Peter Mandelson. People didn't know the extent of his friendship. They certainly didn't know that allegedly Mandelson and his now husband were taking money from Epstein. And above all, they didn't know that Peter Mandelson was passing on government information to Epstein. And I have to say that, you know, talking to people who know Peter Mandelson very well, there is a massive sense of betrayal by Peter Mandelson, about Peter Mandelson, because even after the information came out about his friendship with Epstein, he was being asked by some people, well, is there anything more to come out? And he said, oh, no, absolutely not. And now it comes out subsequently that he's been passing government information to Epstein. And that, I think, has led to, you know, him really falling out with a lot of those people who might be inclined to support him. On top of that, it's also important to remember that the firm Global Counsel, which was set up by him and one of his former advisors, Ben Wegg-Prosser, announced this week that that has gone into effective liquidation. So before all this, it was believed that that company was worth, you know, to Peter Mandelson and to Ben Wegg-Prosser, the chief executive, worth millions, and now it's worth nothing. So that is very sad. But even worse, by going into liquidation, a large number of those people who were employed by Global Counsel are losing their jobs, and they were completely innocent from any of this involvement with Epstein. So he has had an absolutely catastrophic impact on the people around him, whereas if one looks at Prince Andrew, the impact of what he's done is probably confined to the royal family.
I mean, you make the point about, you know, Keir Starmer saying he was lied to again. And we'll know more about this, of course, because this afternoon the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Darren Jones, has confirmed the government will publish this first tranche of documents relating to that whole episode of Mandelson's appointment to become US ambassador. And they'll release those, unless this arrest changes this, of course, they'll release those in early March. And one wonders what they will show. I mean, this could be, you know, a huge number of documents and emails of contact between Keir Starmer and Peter Mandelson, other people at the heart of Number 10 and Peter Mandelson.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the case, although, of course, as we understand it, as far as getting stuff into the public domain, whatever Downing Street releases will have to be reviewed by the Intelligence and Security Committee, chaired by Lord Beamish, former Labour MP, and they are going to take into account impact on foreign affairs and national security. So we may not quite see everything. But I think, you know, it's not putting two and two together to make five to say that the departures of Morgan McSweeney from his job as the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, and also of Tim Allen as the newly appointed media guru to the Prime Minister, are related to the fact that they were close allies in the past of Peter Mandelson, and probably some of the messages discussing his appointment will be an embarrassment to them. It's interesting that there's been very little focus on Jonathan Powell, who, of course, was Tony Blair's Chief of Staff in Downing Street for 10 years, knows Peter Mandelson very well, and is now the National Security Advisor. It is being said, I don't have proof of this, that Jonathan Powell, although he knew Peter Mandelson very well, was one of those people advising caution to Keir Starmer in terms of appointing him as the ambassador. And I think it is important to say that although it's about offences which were committed more than 10 years ago that are being investigated, or potential offences that are being investigated, certainly the prominence of Peter Mandelson seeking that office of going to Washington, giving reassurances to the Prime Minister, have undoubtedly contributed to the focus on him and the heights from which he's fallen. It's also, I think, you know, it's significant to say that there were many people, I was one of them, many journalists who felt that it was worth taking the risk in appointing Peter Mandelson because of his skills politically and in trade matters. But that was without the knowledge of what was in the Epstein papers. And of course, Peter Mandelson himself has said that he didn't have access to his past email accounts and his contacts with Jeffrey Epstein. So he didn't necessarily know the full extent of what was going to be revealed, which has proved absolutely ruinous for him.
Adam, thank you very much for coming on and being with us. Appreciate that. We should just point out once again that Lord Mandelson has repeatedly denied all wrongdoing. He's previously apologised for maintaining his relationship with Epstein, which he admitted went on far too long. We've got more details of the timing of the operation, the police arrest of Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, this afternoon. They went into his home in Camden at 16 minutes past 4. That's when they entered his house. And 28 minutes later, at 4:44, they left the property with him. As we heard of his arrest, my colleague Ali Fortescue was recording an interview with the Shadow Chancellor, Sir Mel Stride, for tonight's Politics Hub. She got his reaction to the breaking news.
Well, I think it also speaks to a lack of judgment on the part of the Prime Minister, and part of the process now of getting to the bottom of exactly what happened will also be what happened around his appointment, what information was known at what time and by whom, and were the right decisions, justifiable decisions taken in that context. So there's a lot that we need to know about. But it does seem to me that you've got a rather chaotic number 10, a Prime Minister whose judgment has been severely lacking, not just in that, but in issues around others like Matthew Doyle, for example. And now we've got this situation with the journalist Gabriel Program, who was investigated at the behest of Labour Together, and there are lots of issues around that. We've got Laurie Magnus, the ethics advisor, looking into that as well. There just seems to be this swirl of poor judgment and, inappropriate things going on in and around number 10.
Policing and crime commentator, former advisor to Yvette Cooper, Danny Shaw, good evening, and thank you for being with us. So, well, we have these now two high-profile men being investigated, interviewed, have been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office.
Yes, extraordinary, isn't it, Mark? Last week, Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor, senior member of the royal family, taken away in a police car, held in custody in a police station for 10 to 11 hours and then driven back on suspicion of misconduct in public office, not in the clear, released under investigation. And now Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, ex-cabinet minister, ex-British ambassador to the United States, just a few months ago in the White House with Sir Keir Starmer there and Donald Trump. And now, being taken away in a police car to a police station for questioning, also under the offence of misconduct in public office. I mean, these are extraordinary moments. What we need to remember, though, I think, is that the police investigations in both cases, and they're separate investigations, one by Thames Valley Police, this by the Metropolitan Police, are in the early stages. That's quite clear. There'll be a lot of documents to go through. When police question Peter Mandelson, they will hear, presumably, his side of the story. He will give an account. He will have a lawyer present, I'm sure. And so police will then have to go away and assess what he's told them, together with the other information they've got, before deciding what to do next, whether they continue their investigations or whether they move to make a decision about a charge or not.
Although they involve allegations that have emerged from these documents, these allegations are from way back, 2008, suggestions of an exchange of emails between Lord Mandelson and Epstein about bankers' bonus policy and so forth. Not easy to fully investigate.
Well, what they've got to do, they've got these emails from the tranche of files, the Epstein files, about 3 million documents or so. What they've got to do is to try and get the unredacted copies of those emails, because many of those emails have names blanked out or photographs blanked out. So they want to see that. They want to probably see the emails in their entirety to get the full context behind them. That's really important. There may be other documents and emails held on digital devices at Mandelson's homes in Wiltshire or Camden that they will have wanted to look at. There'll be further context around that. And then I suppose it's looking at the wider picture about, you know, this information that was allegedly passed on. Was that information already in the public domain? Was that part of a bigger pattern of information sharing that was common practice? That these are all things that they need to bottom out, and they will do that presumably by questioning him. He will have been expecting these police interviews. He's been around long enough to know that. Police have been searching his properties. He saw what happened to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He will have known that he will be required to answer questions in custody, and I'm sure he'll have been thinking about that and how he's going to approach that. So this will have come as no surprise. He knows that the photographers have been camped outside his addresses. He's used to that publicity, but still, for a former cabinet minister to be led off under arrest and to be booked into a police station, swabbed for DNA, fingerprinted, mugshot taken, held in a police cell, that is quite a moment.
And Danny, it was while we were on air on Thursday that we heard that the Home Office had been informed of the arrest of Andrew just momentarily, we think, before it had happened. Do you think that the government would have been informed about this?
No, and I sincerely hope they were not informed about this. I mean, this is arrest of a Labour politician. So it would be completely inappropriate for the government, anyone in the government, be it the Prime Minister or the Home Secretary, anyone else, to be told about his arrest. I can understand, just about understand, why the Home Office was tipped off about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's arrest, because, you know, there are security implications, I suppose, with such a high-profile operation like that. And so I can understand that to some extent, although I hope they won't give him much advance notice. But there will be no justification I can see for anyone knowing about it in advance.
Danny, good to talk to you again. Thank you very much indeed. Going to speak more to Anne McElvoy in just a moment, but let's go to our correspondent Molly Malone, who is now outside the London home of Lord Mandelson, where he was arrested this afternoon, and just bring us up to date. What's the scene there, Molly?
Well, we've known for a couple of weeks that police have been investigating Peter Mandelson. We've seen them search properties linked to him in Wiltshire and also here in central London. But a significant development came just after 5 o'clock as the Metropolitan Police confirmed that they'd arrested a 72-year-old man on suspicion of misconduct in a public office. As we saw those pictures of Peter Mandelson being led out of his home in central London, just near Regent's Park, by officers. Now, this is all as we know, following allegations, following the release of a load of documents relating to the convicted paedophile and financier Jeffrey Epstein a couple of weeks ago now. And as we know, in those documents, we appeared to see Peter Mandelson communicating with Jeffrey Epstein, allegations, of course, that he communicated with him and shared market-sensitive information when he was a cabinet minister, when he was business secretary at the height of the new Labour government. He was a political figure at the very heart of Downing Street. Now, we should say Peter Mandelson has long denied any wrongdoing, not responding specifically to these allegations, but he's denied any wrongdoing, saying that his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein went on for too long and apologising for that. But what, as we've been hearing in the last couple of hours, will happen to him now is that even though, despite the fact that he was a man at the very heart of the Downing Street operation, in the eyes of the law, he will be treated as any ordinary citizen. He will be checked into police custody at an undisclosed police station. He'll have his DNA swabbed and he'll face police questioning. Interestingly, we've been hearing from police commentators, our own Graham Wetton in the last couple of hours, saying that the police in this case have arrested Peter Mandelson fairly late in the day. Could it be, suggested Graham Wetton, that they end up questioning him not in the early hours of the morning, suggesting that that's not normally typical, but instead perhaps holding him in a cell overnight and questioning him further perhaps in the morning. But a significant development, of course, arresting Peter Mandelson, a man for so long, for 4 decades, at the top of politics, at the heart of the new Labour operation, arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office.
Molly, thank you very much indeed. Anne McElvoy is still with me here. So, I mean, there's no question about it. It is, as Sam Coates said earlier, a seminal moment in British politics.
Sam and Anne don't always agree, but I think as listeners to the podcast may know. Yeah. But I think on this, absolutely, I do agree with Sam. It is a seminal moment, and everything that we're seeing there, even these very unfortunate optics that we've just been watching there on the screen, and what that says, and the questions that it throws up, not just about judgment, but I think the deeper question. And I enjoyed what Adam Bolton had to say. I see a couple of things there a little bit differently. I do think that Peter Mandelson was someone who had immense self-belief. He had some swagger. He had poise, he was suave, he was very funny, very witty, and he could also be quite cruel and quite cutting. And I think people took him at his own estimation. And I think this may be, you know, the moral of the story, whatever happens in terms of like the legal procedures and what he is in the end guilty of, innocent of, as you say, quite rightly to keep repeating. You know, he denies wrongdoing, but he does accept that he made a considerable misjudgment. I remember him saying to me, it came back to me when I was watching that, Mark, at one of these big events when he was in full pomp. And I asked, I said, oh, come on, let's go and get a bit of a political gossip of what's going on. And he said, drew himself up and said, I am a diplomat now. I don't get involved in all this scuttlebutt about politics. He had that ability to shapeshift and to take other people with him largely and to be believed in his own. Adam said he was a trade expert. I would say I don't see an awful lot of proof of that in the biography. He certainly did go as trade commissioner to Brussels. If you talk to the Brussels bubble, I think they always saw him as a politician on loan for the UK. It was certainly not only his fault that various trade rounds didn't work out. But I think he was someone who was good at lots, or is someone, I should say, he's still with us, good at many different things. Communication, conviction. He's someone who could convince other people that he was right. That's a great political skill. It does come sometimes with a bit of a downside when you convince yourself that nothing you're doing is perhaps, needs a more kind of testing eye, or that you should step back from it.
Right, and just a final thought from you on the impact of the pictures that we have been seeing this evening on Keir Starmer and his government.
There's a lot of heads in hands around Number 10 these days for the last couple of weeks for a kind of concatenation of problems. I think Peter Mandelson, that one will strike deep in Keir Starmer because, yes, as Adam was pointing out, this would all still have happened, but it wouldn't have happened to someone who had, if you like, had the benediction of a Prime Minister to be his trusted ally, not just to the US, but in the relationship back to him personally in Number 10. That will hurt Keir Starmer very much, and I think he will be feeling it very deeply as he watches these pictures today. OK, Anne, thank you very much for coming in. I appreciate it. Thank you. Right, joining me now is former senior policy advisor to Ed Miliband, Sonia Soda. Good evening. Thanks for being with us. And just first, your thoughts about these events.
Well, I agree with what Sam Coates and Anne McElvoy were just saying, which is this is a hugely significant moment in British politics. It's really, really awkward for the Prime Minister. Peter Mandelson is a man that he appointed to be ambassador to the US. There was already information in the public domain about the fact that he was close to Jeffrey Epstein. Obviously, we didn't know about some of the revelations that have come out of the Epstein files. And those documents have now led to his arrest, and the police are investigating him for the crime of misconduct in public office. He obviously denies any wrongdoing.
Right. Of course, at the moment, he denies any wrongdoing, and we need to keep emphasising that. But nevertheless, these pictures, Sonia, pretty disastrous for Number 10.
It is. I mean, I think it would have have been just a really shocking moment in British politics anyway. But the fact that Peter Mandelson was appointed by the Prime Minister to be US Ambassador. It was quite a controversial appointment at the time. There were people at the time in his party who felt that it wasn't the right thing to do, that there was too much swirling around Peter Mandelson, that meant that he really shouldn't have been put in that role. And I think, it's the fact that this isn't just about Labour past and what happened during the new Labour government during 1997 to 2010. There was a very deliberate focus on bringing him back into government by Keir Starmer, by appointing him ambassador to the US, a hugely important diplomatic role, probably the most important role in the diplomatic service. So it's hard not to see these images and think about the consequences, not just for Labour administrations past, but this Labour administration as well.
But he was clearly trusted by Keir Starmer, trusted also, of course, by Tony Blair, and trusted by Gordon Brown, very close to Gordon Brown in Gordon Brown's government, when these emails are alleged to have been sent to Jeffrey Epstein, with the allegations that this is all about.
That's right. And I think what's quite extraordinary, actually, is if you look at the role that Gordon Brown is now playing. So Gordon Brown is the former Prime Minister who had, of course, Peter Mandelson in his government. He was playing a really important role during the financial crisis. He was de facto the Deputy Prime Minister as Business Secretary. And we know from the Epstein leaks now there is evidence of emails that he sent to Jeffrey Epstein that appeared to share confidential government information with Jeffrey Epstein, market-sensitive information. So he was in Gordon Brown's government, and now Gordon Brown is going through the files himself, pulling out things, sending things to the police, I think particularly in relation to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and in relation to the flight logs of jets, Jeffrey Epstein's jets that were landing in the UK. So it's quite a sort of striking about turn.
And just finally, do these images that we're seeing, the arrest of Peter Mandelson, does this sort of thing impact by-elections?
I suspect that a lot of this will have sort of been priced into what's happening in the by-election. Of course, you've got a by-election on Thursday in Gorton and Denton. So I think many people might have been expecting this in the wake of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's arrest, but I think it's certainly not good news for the government. If you look at what voters are saying in focus groups, there's huge disengagement with mainstream politics. Voters really don't feel like politics is working for them, and there are a number of voters who sort of feel like, well, all mainstream politicians are the same, they're just in it for themselves, there's sort of evidence of corruption or whatever. That is a strong feeling when you talk to voters, so it's certainly not going to do Labour any favours.
Sonia, thank you very much for coming on. Let's speak now to Donald McIntyre, author of Peter Mandelson's biography, Mandelson and the Making of New Labour. Good evening. Thanks for being with us and your reaction to Lord Mandelson's arrest.
Well, it's obviously very bad news for him, and it's pretty bad news for the government as well. Though, just at the risk of sort of spoiling the party here, can I just say that we have to remember in terms of Keir Starmer, I think my own view is that he made a bad mistake by appointing him as ambassador when, as everybody's already said to you, he knew that there was a link with Epstein. Of course, the things that Mandelson is being arrested under suspicion for are not anything to do with Keir Starmer. They are to do with the fact that he leaked material, extremely sensitive material, at the time that he was working for Gordon Brown. So, I don't want to sound like a Labour apparatchik, which is the last thing I am, but it just needs sort of slightly disaggregating from the problem of Keir Starmer. Now, the big issue for Starmer is he keeps saying that Mandelson lied to him at the time of the appointment to the embassy in Washington. And apparently we're going to get more information next week on exactly what that means, because we've had very little detail about that. We don't even know whether Keir Starmer sort of looked Peter Mandelson in the eye and said, what is this relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah. I mean, what I'm interested in is how you think Peter Mandelson will be taking this today, this arrest. I mean, he's a man who likes to be in control, and he's not in control now, clearly.
Well, that's true. I mean, his famous remark after losing in Hartlepool, "I'm a fighter, not a quitter," is very much actually in his DNA, even in terrible situations. I mean, he fought very hard to keep his job after years and years ago, but way back in the early 2000s, when he took a big loan from Geoffrey Robinson. He fought to keep his job then unsuccessfully, and again when he was Northern Ireland Secretary and intervened in the Hindujas' attitude to the passport. I mean, I'm sure he will get good legal advice, and I'm also sure that he will want to, he will not surrender over this. As people have already said to you, he apparently, though he hasn't made any public comment, insists that he wasn't doing this for gain. Misconduct in public office, as you've already also been told, is quite a complicated issue. So, I mean, I'm sure he will, I'm sure he'll get a good lawyer, and I'm sure he'll resist. I mean, I don't think he'll be suddenly confessing, put it that way.
Yeah, and he's had to leave governments before, resignations and so forth. What is it about Peter Mandelson that, and sailing close to the wind?
Well, it's a really good question. And, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I think one of the striking things about Mandelson is that he was brilliant in his earlier days as a politician at sort of anticipating political trouble ahead for the Labour Party or for the government that he was, when he was in government. I mean, the paradox is that he's always been absolutely terrible at judging the potential pitfalls in his own career. And I am at a loss to explain that. I mean, it's true, as Anne McElvoy told you, that he has a lot of self-belief, but there's some blind spot in working out what he can get away with. He certainly was always a risk taker, no question, both politically and personally. But why he didn't see that transmitting market-sensitive information to Jeffrey Epstein, if indeed, we know he did actually, was a dangerous thing against a protocol which, he'd been used to. He'd been held two major cabinet offices before, one in the ultra-sensitive post of the Northern Ireland office. So, I wish I had a clearer answer to give you, but I don't.
Well, and this well, I was going to say strange attraction to rich men, but I mean, it explains itself. But I mean, that is part of his, part of his life.
Yes, it is. I mean, it didn't, I think, become part of his life until two things happened. One was that when it became fairly clear that Tony Blair was going to win the 1997 election, and Peter Mandelson was known to be one of his closest advisors, doors started to open to, rich and powerful people. And then again, that was accentuated when he became business secretary. He was actually quite a good business secretary, but it certainly brought him into contact, and actually including in the United States, with rich people.
Yeah. Donald, we've got to leave it there. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We've got to leave it there, but I appreciate you coming on. We've run out of time. And the news tonight is that Lord Mandelson has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The Metropolitan Police said the 72-year-old was taken to a London police station for interview this evening. There we are. That was the News Hour. Thanks very much for watching. Coming up next, Ali Fortescue with The Politics Hub.
Hello, good evening. You're watching the Politics Hub. We're going to get straight to some big breaking news tonight. Peter Mandelson has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. These are the pictures of his arrest, which show him being led away from his home by police officers and into an unmarked car. Shortly after, the Metropolitan Police said this in a statement. Officers have arrested a 72-year-old man on suspicion of misconduct in public office. He was arrested at an address in Camden on Monday, the 23rd of February, and has been taken to a London police station for interview. This follows search warrants at 2 addresses in the Wiltshire and Camden areas. Well, we should say straight away that Lord Mandelson has repeatedly denied all wrongdoing. He previously apologised for maintaining his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, which he admitted went on too long. Well, as you can see, we have packed the studio tonight with top talent to discuss throughout the hour. We will get their thoughts very shortly. But first, let's go straight to our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who's in Greater Manchester. Sam, I mean, hard to overstate the significance of all of this for the Labour Party, isn't it?
That's right, Ali. With that short Metropolitan Police statement, a seismic moment for politics. You saw Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, being led away in the gilet, face thunderous by the Metropolitan Police. It's a significant moment, as you say, hard to overstate. Just 6 months ago, he was one of the half-dozen most senior figures in Keir Starmer's government. He was our man in Washington, subject to the secrets and the relationship with Donald Trump. Now, his career in ruins and facing police investigation following that arrest in public, in the glare of the public light earlier this afternoon. This is a tragedy of proportions for the Labour Party, and it is an incredibly perilous moment for Lord Mandelson. The allegation is that he passed confidential government secrets to the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein when he was business secretary in Gordon Brown's government in the late 2000s. That is at the heart of the allegation of misconduct in public office that the Metropolitan Police say they have arrested Peter Mandelson and are interviewing him as we speak about. But this is a treacherous moment for Keir Starmer as well, because it was Keir Starmer personally who overrode all of the objections, who cast aside all of the doubts about Lord Mandelson, his checkered previous career, his links to Jeffrey Epstein after the point at which he was jailed for his engagement with young women. All of that put aside in order to put Peter Mandelson in the embassy in Washington to manage the return of Donald Trump for the second time and Britain's relationship with his White House. They decided that Peter Mandelson was, in the words of a cabinet minister, worth the risk because of his ability to help forge that relationship. Far from clear that even Peter Mandelson's ability to do that was beyond doubt. Complaints from the Trump White House that he wound them up didn't forge the closest of relationships. But really, the disaster for Labour, much broader than that, as Keir Starmer faces questions about why he gave in to the suggestion, persistent suggestion from his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, to appoint Lord Mandelson, with whom Morgan McSweeney was very close. Why he chose not to interrogate the allegations about Jeffrey Epstein that were in the public domain at the point of his appointment more closely, that might have provided the kind of red flag that would have stopped that appointment. Instead, Peter Mandelson was sacked last September and now is with the police under allegations, being questioned under allegations of misconduct in public office at an absolutely perilous moment for Keir Starmer himself. It's the last thing he wants, his judgment being questioned at this point, as he faces the potential of a difficult by-election this week, potentially catastrophic elections in May. There are figures in his own cabinet who are circling to potentially take over from him, and he is recording some of the worst polling on record for any Prime Minister. The events of today are the last thing Keir Starmer would have wanted to see.
And the timing, Sam, is interesting, isn't it? Because we have the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones, just before we find out that Peter Mandelson's been arrested, saying that we're going to get some of the documents relating to his appointment as soon as next week.
That's right. The arrest is not the only bit of bad news for Keir Starmer when it comes to Peter Mandelson. A vote in Parliament, a manoeuvre by the Tories in Parliament a couple of weeks ago, is forcing the government to disclose potentially tens of thousands of pieces of correspondence involving Peter Mandelson, about Peter Mandelson, in the run-up and duration of his time as ambassador. That they are being required to disclose after essentially losing the argument with their own MPs to try and keep stuff secret. Now Keir Starmer faces wave upon wave of the kind of documentation revealing the inner workings of our diplomacy and our political system that no government would find easy to withstand, reaching the glare of publicity, that no government would find in any way comfortable. And that is now coming. Disclosure starting as early as next week, we are told. Some documents held back because of the police investigation and fears it could compromise that. But I think even the smallest amount will be picked upon now and will provide another reason, another area of danger for Keir Starmer in the weeks and months ahead.
OK, thanks so much, Sam Coates. Well, Sky's Molly Malone is outside Peter Mandelson's house in North London. Molly, can you just remind us of what exactly happened there?
Well, we've known for weeks that police have been investigating Peter Mandelson. We've seen them conduct searches here at this central London home near Regent's Park, but also another property linked to Peter Mandelson in Wiltshire. But that significant development came just after 5 o'clock this evening, after the Metropolitan Police confirmed that they'd arrested a 72-year-old man on suspicion of misconduct in a public office. And we saw those pictures of Peter Mandelson being led out of his property by police officers. Now, this is all, as we know, after allegations that had been mounting for a couple of weeks after the release of a load of documents related to the convicted paedophile and financier Jeffrey Epstein. And we appeared in some of those documents to see Peter Mandelson communicating with him, with allegations suggesting that he'd been sending Jeffrey Epstein sensitive government, market-sensitive information while he was in government, at the heart of the new Labour government, while he was a cabinet minister and while he was business secretary, appearing allegations suggesting that he was offering details, sensitive government details and details of an EU bailout. Now, we should say that Peter Mandelson has long denied any wrongdoing. He'd previously said sorry and admitted that his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein had gone on for too long, but he hadn't been responding to specific allegations, though had been denying any wrongdoing. What will be happening to him this evening, though, is that despite the fact that he was at the very heart of the Downing Street operation, despite the fact that until very recently he was a top diplomat, he was Britain's man in Washington, he will, in the eyes of the law, be treated in the same way as any other detainee, any other citizen that had been arrested. He will be checked in to custody, into police custody, an undisclosed police station. He will have his DNA swabbed, he will be searched, and then he will face police questioning. We've been hearing from police commentators throughout the course of the last couple of hours, and our own Graham Wetton making the point that police actually made this arrest, arresting Peter Mandelson, fairly late in the day, so saying that it's not typical really for police to conduct interviews in the early hours of the morning. So Graham Wetton suggesting that we could have a situation where Peter Mandelson is perhaps held in a cell overnight and then further questioned tomorrow morning. The truth, though, is that really we don't know at the moment. They are in the early stages of their investigation, and it will be now for the legal process to play out.
OK, Molly, thank you very much. You can see live pictures there outside Peter Mandelson's house in Camden. Well, earlier, my colleague Mark Austin got the reaction from Skills Minister Baroness Jackie Smith shortly after news of Peter Mandelson's arrest broke.
I was the Home Secretary, so I think I know better than to comment on what is clearly an ongoing police investigation. The police will do what they need to do in relation to this arrest and this investigation. But I suppose it just behoves us once again to remember, first of all, that anybody who knows anything about Jeffrey Epstein should, of course, be providing that information. And once again, we need to keep at the heart of our thoughts the victims of his activity, and that's what I'll be doing this evening.
These are images which will not go down well in Downing Street at all. More problems for Keir Starmer, because it does reflect on Keir Starmer's decision to appoint him as ambassador to Washington in the first place.
Well, of course, as soon as Keir Starmer understood what the reality of Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was, he sacked him. In the middle of the night, actually. So, I think that's an important area of judgment. But, yeah, of course, to be frank, I mean, I'm here today to talk about a really important set of reforms that the government is undertaking for children in our schools with special educational needs. That's what I'd rather be talking about.
Well, isn't this the issue here, that here we are, Peter Mandelson is on the left of your screen, and we're not going to move away from this story? I mean, isn't it isn't that the problem about the way that Peter Mandelson behaved? We don't know whether he's, guilty of misconduct in public office or not, but it is dominating the news, and you're not getting in what you want to talk about, which is schools.
Well, it is at this moment, and I think I've been pretty clear about our responsibility as public servants to allow the police to get on with their investigation. But for years to come, what will make a real difference to our children is whether or not we've got an education system that allows them to achieve their full potential, including those children with special educational needs. And that's the reason why today we've made important announcements about how we invest more money in providing the support that those children need without their parents having to fight lengthy legal battles to get that support for their children.
OK. The other thing we've learned in the last few minutes is that the Chief Secretary, Darren Jones, has said that the government expects to publish this first tranche of documents relating to Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador in early March. How embarrassing could that be for the government? I mean, these will quite possibly be a huge tranche, including personal, correspondence and messages between Prime Minister and Mandelson and other people at the heart of Downing Street and Peter Mandelson.
Well, of course, the reason why they're being published is because the Prime Minister has been absolutely clear that he wants full transparency about the process of appointing Peter Mandelson, as well as reviewing the way in which those appointments, and particularly that the vetting happens. You can't have it both ways, Mark. If that wasn't happening, you'd be saying to me, why is there not more transparency? The Prime Minister took swift action against Peter Mandelson when the extent of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein became clear, and he's now making sure that the information and messages around that are being released as effectively as possible, whilst, of course, not prejudicing any investigations that are underway at the moment.
Right. I mean, but you can't have it both ways either, because Keir Starmer made the decision in the first place.
And that's part of what the messages will identify. It's part of the reason why Keir Starmer, having apologised for making that decision, is now making sure that all of the information around it is available for people to see. OK, and just finally, Mel Stride described this as a dark day for Downing Street. I mean, he's right, isn't it? It is another dark day for Downing Street. Well, yeah, in some ways, as you've identified, it's not what we want to talk about. More importantly, I don't think it's what those parents currently struggling to get the sort of support for their children with special educational needs that they want are also primarily interested in. What they want to hear from me is reassurance that we will put in place for their children the additional support at an earlier stage to enable them to make the most of their lives in schools and to reach their full potential. And that's what we've been talking about today, both the £4 billion worth of additional investment, the way in which that will enable more children to get the support they need in the schools, which will enable them to learn alongside their friends and to achieve everything that they can out of our school system. That's what I've been focused on today.
Right, well, Baroness, I'm glad you were able to talk about that, at least at the end there, because we do, as you know, and you'll be aware, have this story to cover. But Baroness, thank you very much indeed for coming on.
Well, that was the immediate response there from the government. Well, in the last half hour, we have heard from the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, who's given her reaction.
This is the defining moment of Keir Starmer's premiership. Watching the man who he appointed to the highest position in our diplomatic service getting arrested by police, I think is an image that's going to stay with all of us for many, many years to come. And when people think about Keir Starmer and his premiership, they will see the arrest of Peter Mandelson as the defining moment.
What does it say about the Prime Minister's leadership, and how much longer can he go on for?
Well, I think that the fact that I asked him if he had full confidence in Peter Mandelson just a few months ago, and he said yes, despite all of these allegations being known. Only to see the man arrested shows that the Prime Minister has a terrible judgment. He's weak. He could have done more. He has not released the information around the files. Instead, he sacked the person who was supposed to be overseeing the release. I think that shows what kind of person the Prime Minister is.
Will you be calling for him to stand down?
Well, actually, what I'm calling for first is for him to release the Mandelson files. We had a vote in Parliament, the humble address. I led on this. I'm the person who's been holding him to account on this issue. He has promised to release the files, and he hasn't done so. I think before he goes, he needs to be transparent and let us see what is, what it is that has been hidden for so long. We need to know. It is Parliament's job to hold government to account. He's been hoping that people would have been distracted by the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. I have said I'm not going to be distracted. My job is to hold him to account. He has not released those files. Everybody knows why. He's instead sacked the person who was overseeing the release. He needs to release those files now. And if he can't do that, then he absolutely should go, because it goes back to his judgment, the fact that this is a cover-up. Let's see the files.
Once we see those files, do you anticipate that it's not going to be much longer left for Keir Starmer?
I think it's already time running out for Keir Starmer. He does not have authority in his party. In Parliament today, we saw Labour MP after Labour MP attack the government. They are not a happy bunch. He is now a hostage to his backbenchers, and it's a matter of when he goes, not if he goes.
Final question. This is a low point for the government. How bad really is it?
This is an extremely low point for the government. I think that it could actually get worse, because they do not have a plan for government. They do not know why they are there. They just wanted to be in government, and that's why they're flailing around. And in fact, it is the things that I've been doing that are getting them to shift the agenda, whether it is on reversing the family farms tax, whether it is on what they did with winter fuel, the national grooming gang scandal, even today talking about scrapping the interest on student loan payments because it's not fair. The government has been nowhere to be seen. They've got nothing to say because they don't know what to do.
There, as you can see, here with me in the studio to discuss this big story, our panel, Plaid Cymru Westminster leader Liv Saville-Roberts, journalist and broadcaster Daisy McAndrew, along with our political commentator Adam Bolton. Thanks all for joining us this evening. Adam, let's start with you. I mean, it's hard to overstate the significance of Peter Mandelson, the architect in New Labour, and 6 months ago, our man in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a very long history, more than 40 years, as a key figure in the Labour Party, and really the judgment of all the successive Labour leaders, except Jeremy Corbyn, perhaps, is called into question now, because he worked with Tony Blair. He was an architect of New Labour. It was then Gordon Brown, actually, who brought him back into government in the period which, according to these Epstein files, was when Peter Mandelson was passing information to Jeffrey Epstein, for which he's now being investigated for misconduct in public office. And then, of course, not knowing what was in the Epstein files, and, as he says, having been lied to by Peter Mandelson about the extent of his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, the Prime Minister took the gamble, the present Prime Minister took the gamble of sending him to Washington. There were good reasons for that. He'd been twice trade secretary in the cabinet. He'd been the European trade negotiator. So given that trade was so important, given also, frankly, that having some fairly sinuous political skills was also deemed to be important to deal with the Trump administration, you could see why he took that gamble. And you can see that there was division within Downing Street at the time. Clearly, Morgan McSweeney thought it was a good idea. Others didn't think it was a good idea. Keir Starmer took that gamble, and now it's gone disastrously wrong. And Peter Mandelson is ruined by what's been revealed in those files, whether or not he faces trial, conviction and possible imprisonment, although it seems likely, given the time of the arrest, at least going to spend some time in a police cell tonight. He's ruined, but also the judgment of successive Labour leaders has been ruined. But I stress, by what's been revealed, not what they knew at the time when they appointed Peter Mandelson.
And Daisy, as Adam says, this is about the Prime Minister's judgment as well.
Yes, of course it is. And I take Adam's point, but that reputations have been ruined by what's been revealed, but also it does speak of a lack of judgment, because Peter Mandelson has been sacked more than once, and he has been proven to have not told the truth to people who asked him questions, whether it was about mortgages, whether it was about his friends in high places, his very, very rich associations who he got freebie holidays from or whatever. So for somebody to come back and continually trust the word of somebody who's been sacked multiple times before, I think that on its own shows a lack of judgment, because you are trying to convince the public that you are not like the 14 years of Tory chaos, that you are a whole new regime. So why take the risk of bringing somebody like Peter Mandelson back into the fold? I think that was very, very ill-advised. Stupid.
I think it's important we should stress that he's obviously denied wrongdoing.
Yes, of course.
And also the previous cases don't apply to this case. But no, I take your point. And Liz, let's get your reaction as well.
Well, of course, we had the First Secretary today talking about bringing forward the papers for scrutiny in early March, next week, possibly. And what I would be very concerned now if the government use this as a reason not to bring them forward, because frankly, the purpose of scrutinying those papers is to find out why he was appointed as US ambassador. It's not the same thing as the charge, the arrest that we now know of misconduct in public office. So it's perfectly possible for the government to bring forward these papers, have them at scrutiny with the Intelligence and Security Committee. But I am worried now that the government will use this police action as a reason not to release the papers. It's perfectly possible to have decent scrutiny within the Houses of Parliament through the ISC, and the government mustn't be allowed to wiggle off the hook with this, because in all honesty, this is exactly what the question is. We need to know what the Prime Minister and his advisers knew when they appointed Peter Mandelson, which is not the same thing as misconduct in public office. And that is exactly where we need to come to the judgment about the Prime Minister's judgment. Many of us have doubts about it. Those papers, I think, will prove it, and the government mustn't be allowed to wriggle off the hook and delay those.
Can I come back to you very shortly, Daisy? I know you want to come in, but we've got Graham Wetton on the line. This is our police commentator, and I just want to bring him into the conversation as well. Graham, thank you so much for joining us. Graham, what would Peter Mandelson's afternoon have looked like? We know that officers were in his home for, I think, about half an hour.
Yeah, it looks like they went into his home address. He'd have been arrested there, put into a police car by the detectives, driven to a police station. Ordinarily, when you make an arrest, you then call up the control room and ask to be allocated a custody suite, a police station you can take them to. And they just literally work on like a rota basis, see where the spaces are, see where you are in London and what's the nearest one to you. It's possible, though, that detectives on this occasion may have already booked a custody suite for him. They could even opened up one of the older police stations. All they need is a custody sergeant to be waiting there for him. But more likely, he's gone to one of the normal custody suites. They'd have called up, said they got one arrest in. The space would be allocated at a police station somewhere in London, driven to the custody suite, and then booked in as every other detainee is. If there's a queue, he would have joined the queue to be booked in, walked in front of the custody sergeant. The facts of the arrest related to the custody sergeant, who then authorises detention, tells the person being detained why they're being detained, the offence they're being detained for, and then they will read them their rights. The right to have a solicitor present, the right to have someone informed of their arrest. Now, you can nominate a solicitor if you have one, possibly likely in this case, or the duty solicitor is then called for you. Then be searched. But your personal property is bagged up and sealed. So wallets, phones, keys, belts, ties, etc., shoelaces, put into a property bag and sealed. Normal practice now is for fingerprint, photograph and DNA to be taken on arrival. And then if your legal representative isn't at the police station, by that stage, you are put into one of the cells to wait for your legal rep to turn up. What will then happen is the legal representative turns up. They are then given almost like pre-interview disclosure by the interviewing officers, as in, this is the offence we're interviewing, this is what we're going to, these are the points we're going to ask questions about. So not the full disclosure, but the points they're going to ask questions about during the interview. They then get a private consultation where they decide either to answer the questions, to make no comment, or offer a prepared statement. They will then go into the interview room and the interview commences. As Adam mentioned, though, it's very late in the day to start this process. This could take 2 or 3 hours to be ready for an interview. So there's a possibility he could end up being detained overnight because we put people into a rest period. So they are rested for a suspect interview. We don't tend to interview in the early hours of the morning because people can then say they were too tired to answer the questions, etc.
OK, so there's a possibility he could be held overnight. And remind us on the time frame for any charge. Should remind people he's been arrested, not charged, but it could take months, even years for a charge potentially.
Yeah, possibly. As we've seen with other cases, you have 24 hours an initial detention. So from the time of arrival at the police station, 24 hours. At the 24-hour stage, you then have to go to the superintendent at the police station for an extra, and it's up to 12 hours. But your detention is reviewed after 6 hours initially by the inspector on duty, who then reviews it again after another 9 hours. Then when you hit the 24-hour stage, the superintendent will be approached for a further detention up to 12 hours. At that stage, it has to go before a court for a warrant of further detention. But as we've seen in some other cases, there's a possibility you're either released on police bail, or you're charged, or you're released under investigation.
OK, Graham Merton, thanks so much for your analysis there. Let's bring our panel back in, shall we? Liz, Daisy and Adam are still here. Adam, I mean, they were extraordinary images, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely extraordinary. And I think everyone, and I imagine including Peter Mandelson, had expected him to be arrested following the treatment of Prince Andrew, because, you know, there is, or former Prince Andrew, there is a direct parallel in terms of this issue of misconduct in public life. I have to say, there is one question as to why they've been arrested in this way. It's not necessary to arrest people. You can ask them to come in for an interview or whatever. And that has been the way in which the police have gone about this. And indeed, there was an article in the Times by Fraser Nelson making exactly this point. And I do think there is a certain amount of theatre, both in the case of Peter Mandelson and Andrew, in the way they've been treated, that such is the public and certainly the sort of Westminster level of disapproval of their behaviour, that the police have taken the opportunity to almost do what they do routinely in America, which is the so-called perp walk of bringing people out to humiliation. And when this is all over, I fully understand the public outrage with what they've done. Perhaps people will ask questions as to whether this has been handled properly.
Adam, on that, I get your point that perhaps there is a bit of the authorities wanting to be seen very publicly to be doing their job. But this particular story, you know, the whole Epstein story, the fact that there's suspicions now that there is an establishment elite who are running everything, you know, in this murky world behind the scenes, I think that also lends itself to the authorities needing, not just wanting, but needing to be seen very publicly to be doing their job without favour and without looking like they're giving the establishment a special deal.
Most people who are arrested don't have, to the knowledge of everyone, cameras parked outside their house, do they?
Yeah. But nonetheless, I think what people will take away from this week is these striking images of these men who have been very, very powerful in UK public life, in international public life, seeing their status allegedly evaporating before their eyes. And the fear and that loss of power. But at the same time, let's just take a step back. What they're being charged with is this misconduct in public office. Not a good thing, but it's not the same as trafficking. And you'll have heard over and over again that we should remember, as we should.
Arrested, we should say.
The chart will arrest and yes, with misconduct in public office. But it is striking how there have been no arrests or charges in relation to trafficking. And that brings us back to what has happened to the victims of Al Fayed, and we know what has happened to the victims of Epstein.
And
that really,
in America.
This has not happened in America at all. I'm sure that the Met Police and Thames Valley Police are very aware of that. But there is something here that fundamentally, we know those who have suffered most deeply at the hands of Epstein are those children.
No, you're entirely...
And there is no action on
Well,
that.
you're entirely correct in that. And the real question now is whether, in the case of Mandy and Andy, this whole thing could broaden out, because obviously the police investigate. Sometimes they arrest people and then they, for example, find something on the devices which they go through, the computers or the phones. And we have the former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, actually sending evidence to the police relating to, as far as we can understand, the trafficking and the use of planes, and suggesting that there may be some connection with, certainly with former Prince Andrew, but possibly with Mandelson. So it could, it could go wider, is all I'm saying.
Only just to pick up on Liz's point.
That is the real jeopardy which they're in.
There are 8 other police forces, English police forces, who are looking in specifically to the trafficking allegations. And I think those allegations are harder and more complicated, even though we know public office, misconduct in public office is an incredibly difficult accusation to prove and so on. But they are working off documents, that enormous dump of documents. And the trafficking investigations we're led to believe that is all about the jet and when it landed at various English airports. And we know that those investigations are ongoing.
And that's really interesting, because that was raised when Epstein was arrested back, 7 years ago. Looking at the security detail and the records of what they held was raised at the time. And it has taken till now for us to realise that the RAF only keep records for 30 days and the police may not keep records for long enough either. There is a fundamental question. I mean, so one of the big shifts that has happened is this sort of culture of deference. And now we realise, those questions were raised back then, nothing came of them. But now something is beginning to come up, and it's revealing the fact that they're not necessarily going to reveal all that much to us.
We're going to pause there, if that's OK. We will come back to you, Adam, I promise. But let's speak to our legal affairs commentator quickly, Joshua Rosenberg. I just want to talk to you about this offence of misconduct in public office. It is quite unusual, isn't it?
It is an unusual offence, except, of course, this is the one that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was arrested for and presumably questioned about last week. It's, as I was saying to you and your colleagues last week, it's what lawyers call a common law offence. In other words, it's one laid down by the judges. The government's been under pressure for some years, successive governments, to actually put it onto a statutory footing, and indeed there is a bill before Parliament that would do just that. But the bill hasn't yet been passed, and indeed it wouldn't be retrospective anyway. So what the police have got to fall back on is this judge-made offence, which says that it's an offence for a public officer, and that presumably includes a trade envoy, it certainly includes a government minister, who is acting in that capacity, acting as such, and willfully neglects to perform his duty or misconducts himself to such a degree as to amount to an abuse of the public's trust in the office holder, and without, and this is important, without reasonable excuse or justification. Quite complicated, but you get the general idea. If somebody is misconducting themselves to such a degree as to amount to an abuse of the public's trust in that person, well, that's a criminal offence. And because it's never been limited by Parliament, the maximum sentence is life imprisonment.
These allegations relate back to 2008, we think, his time in Gordon Brown's government. Does that make the job for police more difficult because it was such a long time ago?
Well, I think that this sort of case depends on a paper trail, although when we say paper, we mean electronic records. And the question really is whether the electronic records still exist, whether they've been preserved. Now, governments keep some papers, for many years, and they're released after 30 years or whatever it may be. But other records, emails and so on, may well be destroyed. So what the police are going to have to do is not just look through Peter Mandelson's computers to see if there are any emails from, nearly 20 years ago, and I don't know how many of us still have our emails going back that far, systems change, but also look at public records, departmental records, ministerial records, and see what information they can put together and whether they can assemble a case.
And as you were saying, it would need to be proved that he willfully misconducted himself. I mean, is the bar for that quite high?
Yes, although again, it's going to be quite tricky because since it's something that is case-based, any court trying anybody for this offence has to go back through past cases, see what previous judges have said, work out what this means in modern language, and so on. It's all a bit uncertain, although, as I think I said last week, we did raise this with the Director of Public Prosecution, Stephen Parkinson, at a briefing nearly 2 weeks ago, when it looked as if people might be arrested for these charges. And he said that it was perfectly straightforward. It was, after all, laid down by a court just over 20 years ago in the terms that I've been describing, and he thought there would be no difficulty in giving the police the advice they need from the Crown Prosecution Service if they were to make arrests and want to bring charges.
Do you think the government would have known that Peter Mandelson was going to be arrested?
No, I don't think so, because the whole point of perhaps turning up at an unexpected time of day, not first thing in the morning, but quite late in the afternoon, is the element of surprise. You want to see what somebody will say as soon as they arrive on the doorstep. We saw that one of the detectives was wearing a body-worn camera just in case Peter Mandelson actually said anything when they arrived. We don't know what that might have been or anything that he might have said. And also because you don't want them to destroy documents or whatever it may be. So the police would tell as few people as possible. We do know that when they were about to arrest Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, they did tell the Home Office an hour earlier, but that may be what that particular Force Thames Valley did, and when they were arresting a former member of the royal family, it might be that the Metropolitan Police in London would take a different approach when they're arresting a member of the House of Lords and a former minister.
A point that our panel have been making here is that police could have just questioned him. They didn't need to arrest him necessarily. Was there a degree of theatre in this?
I think that is a fair point. And don't forget that the Metropolitan Police may be seen as playing catch-up in a way to Thames Valley Police. Somebody might say to the Met, well, look, that other force has arrested that other suspect, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. How come you haven't arrested Peter Mandelson? I don't know whether that's how these things work. But yes, I can see that this is very public. The police will have known perfectly well that there were cameras outside Peter Mandelson's home, presumably have been for several days, and that this would all be very visible and on camera and on Sky News and other news networks. So there may be some of that. There is a fact. It is a fact that when you arrest somebody, you're able not just to search them, as your crime commentator was explaining, but you can also search where they live. But we're told by the Metropolitan Police that they obtained search warrants, apparently for Peter Mandelson's homes in London and in Wiltshire. So again, it might not have been necessary. On the other hand, if you're going to search somebody's home, you certainly don't want that person in their home. So it would certainly facilitate the search of his home in London if he wasn't there.
OK, Joshua Rosenberg, thank you for joining us on this significant day. Well, the pictures you can see now are outside Peter Mandelson's home, where he was arrested in North London earlier. Liz, Daisy and Adam are still here, and as you can see, they've been joined by our chief political correspondent, John Craig. John, what was your reaction to this news today?
Well, Joshua touched on it really, just how public the whole thing was. I mean, the timings are, the police, those officers arrived at about 4:15 in the afternoon. So they would have been seen arriving by all the journalists and the photographers and camera crews that were there. And then it was about half an hour later, about 4:45, when these pictures were shot. Peter Mandelson, faced like thunder, as some have said today, and being led away by the two officers. And then the confirmation that he'd actually been arrested came just after 5 o'clock, about a quarter of an hour or so after this happened. There are those, other politicians have said that did they really need to arrest him? David Blunkett, a former Home Secretary, has said this evening they could have just been interviewed at home. A bit of a show, he said. I mean, you'll remember this, when the cash for honours, and Tony Blair was fretting, wasn't he, about being questioned by the police. And I can't remember, he wasn't interviewed under caution, was he? That was 2007, I think it was. But I mean,
people. I mean, in the past, people have been asked to go to a police station and then been arrested at a police station. It's possible to do it. And just on the point Joshua Rosenberg was making, Peter Mandelson's homes, as indeed the homes of former Prince Andrew, both of them have already been searched. I mean, Peter Mandelson's were searched last weekend. We saw the police going in. We saw the police taking material away. Peter Mandelson has his devices confiscated and subsequently returned to him. So the argument that they were going to arrest him and then search his home, it doesn't apply in this case. Well, they did. It's already been done.
That's right. They said that in their statement. The arrest follows search warrants at the two addresses. Now, we know those searches began on the 6th of February, just over 2 weeks ago, and we saw a few days later boxes being taken away from, I think it was the house in Wiltshire, possibly the one in near Regent's Park as well. But in the middle of the afternoon, broad daylight, and Andrew, of course, his arrest was first thing in the morning, and we didn't know about it, I don't think, until after it had happened, did we? No. But, I mean... arrested live on TV, well, not quite live on TV, but almost.
And also on the point of lawyers, we know that Peter Mandelson has been visited by lawyers who've been identified in the media already, so there wouldn't have been a question of calling a duty solicitor.
Daisy, I mean, it's extraordinary to think last week we saw the King's brother being arrested. Now we are seeing this towering figure in the Labour Party being arrested. It's worth taking stock.
No, it is. And actually on this issue of whether the Home Office knew, and obviously we did find out last week after Andrew's arrest that Yvette Cooper did know just before, and Joshua was saying maybe...
Shabana Mahmood.
Sorry. That maybe it would have been the same in this case, or maybe it wouldn't because this is a Labour Party figure. One of the things I found fascinating last week is that the arresting officers who drove from Thames Valley to Norfolk, which is a 3-hour journey, they didn't know who they were going to arrest when they were dispatched because there was so much secrecy around Andrew's arrest. So again, you wonder, did these Metropolitan Police arresting officers, did they know who they were going to arrest on the way?
Are you telling me that police are being told, right, you're going to Norfolk? Yeah, I think I know who we're going to go and see in Norfolk.
But it wasn't put on any official channels. It wasn't because they were so concerned that it would leak, which, I mean, that tells you something about
it did seem to come
the
as
leakiness.
A total surprise. Yeah. Liz, what are your thoughts?
For Peter Mandelson?
Yeah.
I mean, the houses were searched previously. We know what has been released so far on the Epstein files. I would venture to say, purely in layperson's terms, that I would imagine that there is a lot that has been released in the Epstein files, which is what has been looked at, has been considered, is this sufficient evidence to reach a certain threshold? And we're looking for more evidence on top of that. We shall wait and see what happens. At the same time, of course, this is a political scandal. This is a massive political scandal for the government. And they have a duty now to behave. If they were talking about the end of Tory chaos in 2024, it's their duty now to make sure that they act appropriately and with honour.
I think it has been confirmed by the chairman of the Intelligence and Security Committee that they will be releasing documents. So your fear perhaps that things are going to be withheld doesn't appear to be standing. Although where I can see a complication, again, I'm not a lawyer, is were they to actually be charges laid against Lord Mandelson. We know that the police early on did say they didn't want anything to be revealed that could damage their prosecution. But of course, as you pointed out, the so-called Mandelson files don't relate to these crimes. They relate to the judgment of the government.
To his appointment as ambassador.
How difficult are the next few days going to be for the Prime Minister?
Well, lost in all this is the fact that the Prime Minister's announced another ethics investigation into another minister this evening, Josh Simons, who was, as has been reported in the Sunday Times as elsewhere, when he was at Labour Together, put effectively a private firm into investigating the background of journalists. There have been calls for Josh Simons to be sacked as a minister. Of course, he didn't do that when he was a minister. So all of this is just contributing, and even this by-election which is taking place, the cause of the by-election was to do with conduct of MPs. So all of this is damaging the reputation of politics and politicians in general. And I have to say, obvious thing for Kemi Bade not to do, and she's been quite effective in stirring this up, but, when she was describing the conduct of this government in terms of its lack of direction and just wanting to be, one did think back not very far to the previous, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss era. And my feeling is, I don't think this is necessarily going to be bad just for the Labour Party. I think it will be bad for what people used to call the natural parties of government, which is the Conservative and the Labour Party.
And this evening, we were meant to be talking about special educational needs reform, this huge package of reforms, and suddenly we've had to change the entire programme.
The Conservatives, of course, are going for Starmer, both Kemi Badenoch and your interview with Samel Stride as well. It's all about the Prime Minister's judgment. And of course, the very moment that arrest was taking place and the police were in Peter Mandelson's house, Darren Jones was on his feet in the House of Commons talking about the release of what he called the first tranche of documents as early as next week. He said early March. And there were plenty of MPs in the House, mostly Labour MPs. You mentioned the Josh Simon story. There was fury on the Labour benches about the Josh Simon saga as well. And there were MPs saying during the Mandelson exchanges, most people would have said you wouldn't touch Peter Mandelson with a barge pole, Andy MacDonald, a left-wing Labour MP, said. And of course, my mind keeps going back to an interview that Peter Kyle gave on Sky News to Trevor Phillips. I think it was round about September, when he said that appointing Peter Mandelson was a risk worth taking. My goodness, what a risk it turned out to be.
Come back to halt, then we will come back to you, our panel. But joining me now is the political historian, Sir Anthony Selden. Thank you very much for joining us. I just want to give a bit of a sense of the significance of Peter Mandelson in the Labour Party. Can you do that for us?
Yeah, so this is an enormous scandal. It's much bigger than Profumo, which was a comparatively contained affair. He was close to 3 prime ministers over 30 years. He was the creator, primarily the creator of New Labour, which saw Labour in power for 13 years. And he never went away. And he was a giant. He was the grandson of someone, Herbert Morrison, who helped create Labour as a party of government. And he always tried to honour, he said, the legacy and the memory of his grandfather. And yet now he seems to be playing a significant part, not in destroying the Labour Party, obviously it's going to carry on, but very significantly damaging it.
He called himself the third man, didn't he, in his autobiography? He really was right at the levers of power. He wasn't Prime Minister, but he was, as he called it, the third man.
Well, yeah, and of course that's an unfortunate reference if one thinks about the film. But he created the sense of New Labour, and I think the damage that he did, and there's a straight line through to Morgan McSweeney, is a belief that, it's really just a game, government, and what you've got to do is to just outmaneuver and swizzle the opposition and come up with focus groups and a little death move here, and then you're going to be finding out from polling and you jink a little bit over there. No. Governments throughout British history, the good governments have been had a story to tell. That's an overworked phrase, but they did have a story to tell, and they were concerned with governing, and they are re-elected not because they have jinked around and listened to focus groups and listened to polling, but because they're conviction governments and they do things. There's an arc to the premiership. They are people who know how to govern, and that's very different from the game of political advisors and politicking. And he really brought that into the Labour bloodstream, and that then became part of the general story. He, more than anybody, it was London weekend television, much more than Oxford, where he'd been a student, that educated him in the way that politics is a game. It's a game of images and impressions. It's about what you can convince people of. It's about instant rebuttal, rather than a much more serious thing, which Harold Wilson, James Callaghan, Clement Attlee, who his grandfather worked for, the great Labour prime ministers knew in their blood. It's a very serious game of governing.
Anthony, Adam Bolton would like to ask you a question, so I'll let him do that.
Well, with all due respect, I just want to say you may be right, and you are right about Peter Mandelson's concern about image, but the account you've given of his significance in the Labour Party is, you said yourself, politics is about governing, it's about getting elected. Well, the Blair government, of which Peter Mandelson was an architect, was elected 3 times. It wasn't a totally content-free electorate, nor was the philosophy of New Labour and what New Labour tried to do simply about image and presentation. And if I may say so, I think that's a rather partisan presentation of the significance of Peter Mandelson, who I fully agree has disgraced the party and has destroyed so much of what he achieved. But to just dismiss it as about presentation and spin, I don't think is justified.
Okay, so we might disagree on that, Adam. I think
talking about getting elected, for example, the Blair government won 3 elections. Are you saying that was entirely wholly?
No, but I think that there'd have been a better government. I think Blair would have been a better prime minister if it had been more substantial and if there'd been more thought put in before, just like Keir Starmer, more thought put in, and you may well disagree, I think you do, more thought put into what we're going to do with
more thought, wasn't there? There was a book called The Project, which Peter Mandelson co-authored. I mean, this is, the man has fallen, he's disgraced himself, he's damaged his party, but to just dismiss three governments in succession is nonsense, frankly, Anthony.
But I think you're doing that. I think you're the one getting emotional here. I'm saying that I think that he would have served the prime ministers better if more thought had been once Tony Blair got into power, as Tony Blair himself admits. When his political capital was at its high point, he didn't use his opportunity to govern and to make the changes that Britain so desperately needed. So I think it's a question of clearly Mandelson was very significant, and his style of politics was important, and other parties have followed it in this country and abroad. But I think that essentially politics, once you're in power, that governing is different to campaigning. And I don't think that was a switch that he properly advocated. And I think that was the shame of, that was the pity for New Labour, that the legacy after 13 years wasn't more substantial and it wasn't heavily enough put towards solid governing. I think the similar story about this current government with Keir Starmer, that had such an extraordinary opportunity with that majority in July 2024 to actually get on and govern and make the changes that the country was longing to see, and to get ahead of issues like AI and other huge concerns like an aging population and the crumbling social services that we wanted to see.
Okay,
and telling an economic story.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for answering our questions and for answering Adam Bolton's as well. Well, you are looking right now at live pictures of Peter Mandelson's home where he was arrested earlier. And as we've been saying throughout our coverage this evening, we should say that Lord Mandelson has repeatedly denied all wrongdoing, and he's previously apologised for maintaining his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, which he admitted went on for too long. Let's get some final thoughts, shall we, from our panel. John, what are your final thoughts this evening?
Well, I suppose we now need to, obviously we wait and see what happens to Lord Mandelson, and I suppose Andrew Mountbatten Windsor as well. But I'm suddenly starting to get a bit, these documents that are coming in early March and wondering what's going to be in
next
those.
Week.
Yeah, potentially, yes. I think that's possibly the next embarrassment for Sir Keir. And I know that you say the Tories, of course, had a bad record as well on sleaze, but the fact is that the opposition are making hay with this particular scandal. Kemi Badenoch, Sir Ed Davey, they all will. The Stephen Flynn of the SNP, Plaid Cymru.
Okay, we don't have long. Let's get to you, Adam, for your final thought.
Well, I think, of course, they will stir it up. All I was talking about was the impact of people out there, the extent to which they're going to pay attention to the details of this and whether they're just going to think that there's a political class that has behaved disgracefully. And the other point I would make at this stage is whether or not Peter Mandelson or Prince Andrew end up serving time, they are already ruined and utterly disgraced, and they have brought down many people around them as well.
They have, whether or not they're rotten apples or whether or not they're indicative of the wider society. But both of those individuals were meant to be serving the public with service and duty. And the suspicion and the whiff is that they were simply feathering their own nest and buddying up to billionaires in order to get gains for themselves and totally disregarding the innocent victims of those people. So this has done huge damage to politics and the royal family. And we're at the beginning, not the end.
Liz, very briefly, your final thoughts.
It means we can question everything, doesn't it? We were supposed to accept the royal family and be utterly deferent to them. And we've now seen so much revealed about the Queen, how it appears that she protected possibly her favourite son, and now her favourite son has fallen utterly from grace. Perhaps we're growing up.
And as the Shadow Chancellor put it, a dark day for the Labour Party. Do you think the Prime Minister is going to find the next couple of days very, very difficult?
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody would be betting on his longevity.
OK, thank you so much to our panel. Liz, Daisy, Adam Bolton, our political commentator, and John Craig, our chief political correspondent. Well, that is it from us on a very significant day here in Westminster. Peter Mandelson, architect right at the top of New Labour. 6 months ago, our man in Washington has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. I will see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mee. Thank you so much for watching this evening, a significant evening in Westminster. We will see you tomorrow night.